On today's show, I'm going to be talking with Ron Fitzgerald. He is a magician. He is an actor. He is a dungeon master. Well, I'll ask him. So welcome to the show, Ron.
Hey, Kelly, how you doing?
I have more credits to rattle off, but I thought we get our feet wet with those. People call you master a lot in the movies. Is that just part of the role, or in real life, are you the master?
Well, Master of the Dark Realm. It's kind of a handle. It almost sounds like a bit of a horror host or Elvira, Mistress of the Dark kind of thing. So, Ron Fitzgerald, Master of the Dark Realm, which basically just means I'm an actor and a gothic illusionist, and I make dark, sticky fun for everyone. So a lot of my tribe, they call me Master Ron, and it's just more fun because I'm also associated a lot heavily with the vampire community and everything because of some of the vampire things I've done and because of the flavor, kind of the vampire gothic vampire flavor of my, illusion show. And so there's a heavy influence from the gothic and the vampire and the gothic industrial underground and everything. So that all goes along with that. And then it's also got the very naughty BDSM context, which I'm fine with, but it's part of the provocative nature of some of what I do.
Well, I don't see David Copperfield getting cast as BDSM club masters in movies, which is probably his loss.
And you know what? He's missing out on a lot of fun, but that's where I've been able to carve out my niche in show business is between acting in horror films and the gothic illusion show. And I've been doing the magic since I was like a kid, since I was 8 years old.
Mhm.
And even in the beginning, it was all just birds and bunnies and bad formal wear and stuff. And that's where it started. But I was a kid that loved all the just weird stuff, horror movies and things like that. But that and comic books but that influence hadn't gone into the show yet. But even then, I saw that the classic version of classic magic is still a guy in a black tux and a cape. And even at that point, and as a kid, I said that dude looks like Dracula. I'm in on this. I'm all
Yep.
about it. It was
Well,
just that it came around later when I developed into a darker style of my own flavor of what I wanted the illusion to look like. Then that got me invited into
mhm,
horror films, and then and it's the same audience for me. The same people who come see me in a horror film, the same people who come and see the illusion show. So at that
mhm,
point, I just kept doing both because I
right.
love being in the horror films that inspired the show in the first place. So it all kind of came around full circle for me, which was weird and fun and gives me a unique place because there are some other guys that do dark magic, of course, but none of them have 20 years of horror film credits behind them.
Right. And I
Yeah,
want to rattle some of those off just to get some people up to speed. And
sure.
then we'll,
Yeah.
we'll kind of go in back order because I really want to talk about your cable access show you did, your
Hmm.
magic. A lot of good questions here, but I did a little binge watching.
Yeah.
So I watched, the one you're probably most known for is Dark Realm, which already is what, almost 8 years old. But I've
Yes.
seen on IMDb as far back as 24. You're in Blood Gnome, which
Hmm.
sounds like, you started working with John Lachago and
Yes.
your frequent collaborator, Vinny,
Vincent Belancio, Mr. Vinny, as I like to
Mr.
call
Vinny.
him. Yeah. Yeah.
And you've done stuff, Eyes of Cruelty, Eye of Cruelty, The Thirsting, Magus. Apparently,
Maggots.
Magus.
Magus, which is another one of John Lachago's movies. It's one of my favorites that I'm in. I starred in that one, and it's about magic users and stuff. The things I do are like, men of mystery and villains and, anti-heroes, things like that. Because, of
Mhm.
course, the look is good for that, right?
Right. You
Yeah.
did Incest Death Squad,
Hmm.
another
That's a
Lachago Bio Slime, which you did a voice,
yes.
which I really like that movie. Great special effects. Dracula's Orgy of
Yeah.
the Damned, of
Yep.
course. Uh, Dark Realm, which we talked about. Into 2014, you did Arkham Sanitarium, Soul Eater, and
Hmm.
most recently back with Vinny. You're in a movie together, which I think it's now called The Devil Canvas,
The Devil.
aka The Devil Frame.
It was originally branded as the Devil Frame, and then as they released it, they rebranded it as many will when they get to release, as The Devil's Canvas, which is way more on. That's written and directed by Chicago filmmaker Rob Sepulveda, which Vinny and I have both worked with before. And I made another short with him a couple of years ago, which ironically I'm about to go share that again because it's titled Year of the Ox, and we're about to enter Year of the Ox this year on the Chinese zodiac. So I'm sure that'll get a little play again. But that's just a short film. It's kind of a proof of concept. But the Devil's Canvas is up. People can stream that now. It's on Vimeo, and that is the new title was to kind of signify more about what it's about, which is ritual magic and voodoo. So it's got a magic connection again, a kind of a metaphysical magic, and that goes into it's set in the high-end art world, which makes it really interesting and fun to watch.
You've carved a niche,
Yes.
And it's not like you have to play something mystical in every movie, but you kind of do. But that's okay. I mean, do you think that's been a strength that you're pegged? You're the go-to guy if you want dungeon master, eerie magician, techno goth. I mean, what do you normally get cast as?
There's a lot of roles in magic, whether it's metaphysical magic or it's theatrical. But mostly it's like supernatural kind of magic, because the look and the inspiration for the show is horror, and metaphysical and supernatural magic and things like that. That's the inspiration for the theatrical magic in my illusion show. So I get cast as that a lot, and that's because of the look. And also, like I say, villains and anti-heroes and things like that too. And sometimes those all kind of cross-pollinate in the same character. They're like magic, but it's the darker character, the bad guys, or the ones that are a little more maybe morally ambiguous or something like that. In the mysterious roles, things like that. So yeah, I think that's got a lot to do with it. But the first movie I was in, which you didn't quite get far enough after that, but the item, which is the first film I did, yeah, and that actually went to Sundance. That's a Sundance film. And I played a mad scientist in that. I played Dr. Odie in the item. And that movie is really awesome. The nice people at Sundance introduced it as, and I quote, Quentin Tarantino on acid. And who doesn't want to be in Quentin Tarantino on acid? I do. It's the kind of stuff I would go watch,
Well, so did I read that was the first shot on digital movie to ever go into Sundance?
Yes, it was the first digitally made movie to be accepted into Sundance. So it made a little history in that way. It didn't win any big awards or anything. It went on in 2001. It went on to a worldwide home video release, which at that point it was, I think it was still coming out. There were still besides disc, it was out on VHS and everything. That's how long ago that one came out.
Well, tell me about this. I always wonder, because there's this whole genre of filmmaking where when they want to show something as being horrific or dark or, threatening, they always go into the BDSM community, the fetish community, people with tattoos, body piercings. But does that ever offend you a little bit, that just because you're in that world or look like that, you're assumed to be the villain, you're the bad guy? How come we don't see more heroes in those communities?
Well, yeah, exactly. You do a little bit actually, and it's funny because you mentioned Blood Gnome, which is where Vinny and I met, and it was my second film with John. I had done one before him that did not get completed because it ran into some trouble and didn't get completed. I was making that actually side by side with the item at the time.
Well, you had a crash course in filmmaking, because a lot of stuff doesn't get completed. So it's kind of like, you probably learned early on the people that actually get the stuff done are the ones you want to keep working with over and over.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and it did. It was the complete contrast. It's like one gets done and it's really cool and weird, goes all the way to Sundance. The other one dies on the vine. And so it was a complete contrast of the most you could do with a film and then a film, just not even making it out. So it was the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it was some lessons learned about filmmaking and what you wanted to act in right away. It was like, okay, here's the upside, here's the downside, And like you say, always go work with good people, work with people that are going to get the damn project done, and do quality work, not just get it done and bang it out, but do something interesting, and give it quality, give it production value. So when
Well,
it does
one
go on
thing
the
with
market,
Dark Realm, it's in this
yeah,
world, but you're the hero in it. And
yes.
you and the
Well,
people
I
you
wrote
work
it,
with on
so
stage
I
are the
try.
heroes, and it's like Vinny, the more
Mhm.
straight-laced businessman, ends up being the villain.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly it. But that's because we took charge on that one, and because Vinny had come to me, and Vinny has a great horror pedigree that goes all the way back. He's in Roger Corman's Sorority House Massacre in the 80s. So he's
Yes,
got
he
a
is.
great, yeah. He's got a great
Yeah.
horror pedigree. He's a great actor. I mean, he does theater, and he's done The Elephant Man. He can make people cry. He's an amazing actor, and I wish he was doing more, actually,
Mhm.
because I don't think people appreciate him for how good he actually is. And he's good. He's good in front of the camera, and he's great behind the camera. He's
Mhm.
a great shooter. He's a great editor. He's worked for Full Moon, for Charlie Band, and others, and done a lot of work with John Lachago as well. So I'm always thrilled to work with Vinny, and call him one of my good friends. So
But isn't that what's
um,
so good about what you do? And it's not
yeah,
just the movies, but it seems like in your magic, illusion shows, you have people you work with there long term, your
yeah.
assistants, and it just seems like everything you're doing, you have long term relationships with people.
I try to. There, you don't see the ones that didn't work out and then I booted out. But I mean, we all have to be prepared to do that too. We all run into those personalities that want a lot and don't really contribute.
Mhm.
And it's got to be a two-way street. But I do, like everybody that's good, I keep them around. I really appreciate them, and I want to give back to them as much as I, want to, them to bring stuff to the party. For me, it's again, it's a two-way street. And
Mhm.
people like Vinny, I work with John Lachago a lot, and Lady India in my own show, and
Mhm.
she's been great ever since I brought her in for Dark Realm, and we've been working together ever since. And I met her, through the world of burlesque, where I met Cherry's Jubilee and others. There's a lot
Mhm.
of my burlesque connections and friends that I used while I was making Dark Realm, especially because it goes down into the kind of the underbelly of entertainment, especially in
Mhm.
the club scene in the center of the film. It really delves into that.
Well, I'm assuming we're pretty close in age and hopefully have some of the same references. But,
The
for these
same
young,
vintage, as they say.
but there was this era, late 80s going into the early 90s, where, grunge rock was taking over, but it was
Mhm.
also the emergence of the internet, people
Yeah.
finally getting their AOL accounts and being online. And it's so funny, the whole, techno goth, cyber goth, it was hand in hand with a lot of the grunge, even though heaven forbid you should mislabel them. I know there's a lot, there's
Well,
lots of
there's a
distinctions
lot
that.
of variants of it now, and it was interesting because at that time, goth really it had gone from so long, and I mean, goth and punk were very closely associated when they came out of the 70s into the 80s, and then goth split off and did its own thing, and it was very much the romantic and the velvet vampire. And my look, in those days, and like in the early 90s, was very much the vampire Lestat, influenced by that, and Anne Rice. It was very, and like somewhere
Very
between
romantic
Lestat
goth.
and the Goblin King from David Bowie and Labyrinth. I had really long blonde hair. If people want to see that, they can see that in my old cable show on my YouTube channel. But yeah, and that was interesting there because then it did a shift. And then you got all the influence from the cyber and the BDSM world, and all of a sudden, goth was filled up with all this black PVC and leather and things like that, and it's kind of a metal influence came in some of it too. So it was really interesting to see that shift in there. And of course, I kind of flowed with that. My wardrobe and my look changed. I shaved my head, and the wardrobe went harder, less romantic at that point, and more kind of, I guess, the master look is, I guess, what you'd call it, more like that. So it's interesting, that period you're talking about,
Yeah,
and
and I
that's
think
right
one
around.
thing that grunge did, like you were talking burlesque,
Mhm.
side by side with grunge, I think that's when a lot of the neo burlesque was starting to break out in the 90s. And
Yeah.
that Another
later.
component of grunge, and you must remember like the Jim Rose sideshow.
Yes.
And I think that whole thing was not just neo grunge, but this neo sideshow revival, but in a much more industrial way, which was influencing, back and forth and the industrial music scene, with this hard
Yeah.
metallic edge, but that seemed to be reflected in these shows. And just seems you coming up, maybe that was around your cable TV show.
That was
And I'm
right around the end of that. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just wondering, from what you remember back there, was that like a foot in the door for a more gothic magic show? Like, did you ever perform alongside burlesque shows and like sideshow, the Jim Rose style?
Yes. I hosted a show called in the early, well, around, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. I think I started it. But I had hosted a show called Festival of Flesh that was
Mhm.
produced by my friend Miss Illinois, and I became the resident host in there. And I would host the show, so I was, I brought everybody on and off, and I also performed in the show, keeping most of my clothes on while the other acts were doing more of the burlesque and striptease. But I was performing Gothic illusion in there because something like you say in the Jim Rose, and after that there was a shift. It opened up to a lot more of extreme and sideshow performance alongside in there. And it was after that point when I added what my audience loves now. And it is really more sideshow as much as it is from the world of magic and illusion. But I do a razor blade eating act. And you can see that in
Dark Realm. That's one of the things we see. There's also a moment where you put like a long needle through a woman's neck, through her skin.
Yeah.
And that
The vampire,
moment
yes.
just reminded me, to me, that's what I see the Jim Rose and the Razors. It's when they were getting into this whole idea of, the body hooks,
Yes.
the suspensions, and just
Body
the whole
piercing, lots of
sledgehammers to the stomach, and people, pierced tongues,
nails.
lifting things up. So how much of that were you influenced by? I mean, it's not the whole part of your show, but, that was such a big, it was still shocking back then to people.
Well, it was. I mean, that's about the time you had the emergence of acts like Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. So you had, kind of this spooky shock rock thing going on, and that went hand in hand with Jim Rose and that extreme, like an old art form, because his sideshow is old, but it was modernized at that point, and that's exactly what that's part of my attempt what I do with my illusion and my own performance is that it was a personalization and modernization of magic, because magic is ancient. It's been around for eons, and it had gone through a lot of everything up to what was considered modern magic at the time, which is kind of David Copperfield and then others, and then it got into like, David Blaine and Chris Angel and other people like that pushed into that territory that we're talking about a little more with Jim Rose and kind of an in your face kind of thing. But prior to that, it had all been, pretty much polite entertainment. And I thought
And I think for what you were doing, and you said this in an interview, it was something to the effect of stage illusions, with the traditional magician and his assistant. You're confining her to a box, you're sticking swords into it, you're cutting her in half, you're chaining her in. Has kind of this built-in BDSM quality to it.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, it's peeling away that polite veneer on it, because it's like they cover in all this smiling, dancing, happy crap. But it's like when you peel that away and get down into what's going on underneath there is a certain kind of BDSM and even some misogyny in there, because it's always been very male oriented. There's a lot of great female magicians now and stuff. You don't see them a lot. They don't get the showcase that the male performers do in the magic world, which is unfortunate. Maybe we'll see them more. I hope we see them more, because you get to find them more. There's more of an emergence because of the internet and everything. So I hope we see more of them and I'd love to see one of the female magicians break out like a
And
Copperfield or
put a
something
man
like
in a
that.
box,
Um,
poke him with
I
swords.
would hope that they would. I mean, there are some things that I do where I flip the script in my show where, the women, in the bronze bat illusion, she's crawling through my chest. And I have them manhandling me and everything in that. And so that's flipping the script on that. But on the rest of it, I'm peeling off that polite veneer and I am, I'm calling it what it is. It's like in the castle illusion, I'm putting blades in there and cutting her in six pieces or so, and then I am chaining her in by the neck. And when I chain her in by the neck, I pull her in and I kiss her and everything. So we're just really playing with those darker sexual themes that are underlying on the polite magic. It's there, but it's skirted around. It is
Well, even in
because it's a
the
general
so-called
audience.
non-violent ones, maybe this is
Hmm.
why it works so well with Dracula. The
Yeah.
classic magician putting the woman into a trance and then levitating
Yes.
her.
Yes.
That is such a Dracula kind of thing built into it. Not quite as overtly violent, but it's still a lot of submission.
Yes. Well, there is. I mean, the idea is that the magician is out there and you're superseding nature. You know the secrets to the universe and you are able to call up these powers. And it's in a theatrical way where it's been represented in film and literature in the supernatural way. So it's almost like I consider what I do, it's like when we make film and everything, and you'll see them side by side in Dark Realm, but it's like what I do on stage is a theatrical representation of that. And what we see in movies is done with special effects. So I consider what I do is live special effects or special effects done live, and instead of like if we were doing something, a film term would be in camera, but I'm like in audience, I guess you would say, because you're doing it live for an audience, and that's got to happen right there in front of them. The same way you would do an in-camera effect where it's happening all right there in camera without any CGI or anything like that. Whereas it's represented in film largely by more of a film and television and you're getting CGI and amazing CGI, the great stuff that we can do now. So those are the two ways you can see them side by side. And we do a little bit of each of those in Dark Realm, but they don't intermingle. The stage stuff is the stage stuff, and the supernatural stuff, which is not very heavy on the effects at all, is still in there side by side. And so you'll see those representations of that. But that's the whole thing about it superseding, nature. And there is a certain submission of man over nature, of man even over his subordinates, whether they're men or women in those shows. But it's been women because, of course, especially for a mainstream audience, you want to dress it up and sex it up. It's the same thing as like a lot of the horror films that work. It's boobs and blood and things like that. Even going back to the provocative nature of a lot of the stuff that was more subdued, but still very provocative, even back into the early '70s with Hammer horror films and things like that. They were
Right.
still
And without giving too many of your illusions away, because,
yeah.
there's already, the Fox network does that with the Masked Magician, but
Uh,
there's also that, flexible, smaller women could do a
mhm.
lot of very acrobatic things while locked up in those boxes that
And they do.
a big
And they
lumbering guy couldn't do. So there's actually what's so cool about the women that, we think, oh, they're just the submissive assistant. They're doing a lot more
mhm.
inside that box than we realize. They've got some skills, but they make it
Yeah.
look so effortless.
Well, and they do. That's why they're so amazing, and they don't get their praises sung nearly enough because they do. I mean, they're really. I like to call them co-performers because they're co-performers on that stage. They're not just assistant. Sounds a little dismissive.
Right.
So, companions, co-performers, that's who they really are, and that's how I like to
Yeah.
refer to them. I think that's a lot more fair because you're right. You're right on. You're dead on with that. In that they're doing so much of the work inside of the illusion that nobody sees, and you're out there taking credit for it all.
Exactly. Which, oh my God. Well, another thing you talked about the history of magic, back to the Houdini era.
Yeah.
There was this life and death suspense they had when they were doing an escape, especially in a water tank or something.
Mhm.
Audiences always thought there was a chance this person might not make it and die. I mean, there really was this kind of grisly kind of bloodlust with some of this stuff. Like he might die in front of us.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's got to do. I mean, that goes into I think the sideshow nature of a lot of that performance too, because Houdini had done his stage show, especially later in his life, was kind of three parts. He would do straight up magic, and then he would do escapes, and he would also do a third part, which was later came where he was, showing how spiritualists faked their effects and things like that, because the spiritualist movement was really big then. And so that was kind of the third part. He was actually looking for the real thing. He was actually looking for contact with beyond the veil to the other side, but he was finding all these fakes. And that's when he went on a tirade and he started outing them. And that became part of the show later too, because he became well known for that. But the escapes, there is. I mean, that's people, it keeps them on the edge of their seat. It's a kind of entertainment, like you say. It is almost kind of a bloodlust, though. It's like, will he make it out alive? Can he do this? There is a suspense, a theatrical suspense in that. But I mean, and that stuff is dangerous. And I've done that in the past. I've done Houdini's milk can escape, which is a big, milk can shaped, tank filled with water, and you get inside and they padlock it and you escape from it. And it messes with your head when you do things like that. The first time I was in there, just acclimating myself to the illusion, when you're inside of a can filled with water and they put the lid on the first time, every fiber of your being screams, get the hell out of here right now. And you have to fight that, because then on the outside they've got to get that locked up and covered before you're going to perform your escape. And it is a particular bag of weird to get into escapes and things like that. And there's others where they're not water escapes, but they're always trying to put in some sort of a danger element in there. You're right. And that's gone on, and there's been some kind of stunt aspect mixed in with magic. And like you say, that came in later after 2000 and Jim Rose and all that, and the modern sideshow, and that element came into modern magic as well.
That something could go wrong, that it wasn't all illusion. And there is that kind of thing about where the escape, especially, there might be a few tricks, but to a certain extent, you're still holding your breath. You're still doing things where if you don't find that key, you're going to die.
Yeah.
I think the other thing Houdini did was he kind of objectified himself in a way that you didn't see men do, because to show that he wasn't hiding keys on himself, say he'd be shackled up in chains and, wrists were locked together. You see these old pictures of him like in a G-string, or even some, I think he was supposedly naked, because they wanted to prove he wasn't holding on to anything. Like, didn't he do one where he would escape from a jail cell?
Exactly. And they would strip him naked and put him in the cell to make sure he wasn't hiding anything. Yeah.
And there'd be promo pictures of that, and it was kind of, that was really turning the tables. It was almost very fetish-like back
if you look at it in the modern context, yes, it's very fetish-like. You've got a man, almost completely naked, wrapped in chains and locks. So it very much, when you look at it in that through that filter, it very much looks like BDSM, fetish, specifically.
But there's a whole sexual nature to magic in that, the traditional magician is on stage with this automatic stature when he comes out. He's affecting everything around him. He's in control. And you can see how a lot of people watching this, that's why people like David Copperfield were turned into sex symbols, and Chris Angel. And I'm sure throughout the history of magic, it's a little more overt now.
Yeah. That's show business now. I mean, that's show business. You're dressing it up and you're showing off everybody's physique and their assets. I mean, look at the superhero movies and things like that, and how everybody's dressed in those. Pretty form fitting.
Creed and Roy. Crime that
Absolutely.
had this very physicality to it that I don't think they had, magicians had before. They really wanted to show themselves as more athletes.
Yeah, there was certainly that aspect to it, and that I mean, anybody who's really a showbiz professional, and in that, and if that's your persona, you're going to keep in shape with that. And there's always been a lot of that, and there was a lot of provocative things. It's like in their early shows before they got to the big show, where it ran the last of its run. In the early shows in Vegas, they had topless dancers and things like that, which was more the nature of Vegas at that time. But it was more provocative then too, and then became more of a general family show, but still provocative in terms of a more general show in Vegas. With their costuming and the women's costuming.
But
Their
with your
Coca-Cola.
show,
Hmm.
especially adding the more gothic element
Yes.
and the clothing, the vinyl, the leather, that brings that to another level too. And I'm just wondering, how do the
Yeah.
people respond to you? Do you have, I wouldn't say groupies, but it seems like there's kind of a sexy element to your shows.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's by nature, that's by design, because that's what I wanted to put in there. I mean, that is, I wanted it to be. I mean, it just is by nature. It's an extension of my own personality. Because that's just me in front of a camera certainly on stage. It's me turned up to 13. It's just me ramped up a little bit more. But it all comes from your own influences, and I like provocative, irreverent entertainment. I mean, a lot of my influence for the way I perform, especially live on stage, doesn't necessarily come from the world of magic. It comes from music, and it comes from stand-up comedy, and it comes from even burlesque and sideshow. It comes from a lot, and even into comic books and the supernatural. It draws far more from that than it does just theatrical magic, which is why it looks different. Because
You were in a comic book once, weren't you? Wasn't there
I,
like
I am
part of a
currently, yeah.
comic book that incorporated your character?
Haunting Tales of Bachelor's Grove. You can still get them right now. We're on issues 2 and 3. Will be coming out very shortly with myself and Quadrilcia Ona, Queen of the Paranormal. So you got the Queen of the Paranormal and the Master of the Dark Realm together, and we're both real people, but we're put into our personas, and our likenesses are used in this comic book set in Bachelor's Grove, which is, I'm outside of Chicago, and that's where Bachelor's Grove is, and it's one of the most haunted cemeteries in America. So it is centered, stories are centered around there, and it is right now we're in the middle of like a 6-issue limited run of that, which I'm sure will later become a graphic novel or something, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But it was also something. It's like being, one of the influences in my show being horror films, and then finally getting to be in horror films, and then continuing with that. And then as I was young, another one of the influences, certainly on the look and everything, because there's still that, even especially with a lot of the female costuming and of female superheroes like Catwoman and others, very fetishy. If you look at all of it, it's been fetishized quite a bit. And then, so that influence was comic books. So I was an avid comic book collector when I was young as well. So that coming back around and then being able to actually be in a comic later is kind of a dream come true as well. And
Well,
and
do you
now
think that you have an iconic look?
I think so. I'm told that a lot. I mean, it's really different, and it's evolved over time. I mean, when I started out, I kind of looked like Luke Skywalker, and then I became more
Being
of
with
the,
the long blonde hair?
yeah, and then, well, that was before the long blonde hair, and then it got to then the hair went blonde, and then it went really long and blonde, and then it was more of a vampire Lestat and a Goblin King kind of look. And then after that, I went and did a hard change and shaved it all off, because that to me, because the long hair, because I wear eyeliner and everything, like any good, rocker, magi is gonna do for the look, and that comes from a lot of goth and other glam rock and even things like that. That influence is where the eyeliner came
Who
in.
was that evil guy in Harry Potter that had the long blonde hair, the villain?
Malfoy, yes, yeah,
He
especially when
kind
I
of
had
looked
the
like
long
him back then.
Malfoy, yes, Yeah, I very much looked like that back then. Yeah, and that was before Harry Potter and everything. Which is too bad. I think I might have gotten cast if it had,
Do you think they
crossed over.
lifted that look from you?
I doubt that. I don't know. It'd be awesome to say that, but I think they had their own influence. Even though I have a lot of that British culture, which is where the goth culture comes from. It started in London, and so I am very fascinated and have a big love for British culture and the accents and everything and the look of the UK, and they're so much more friendly to the Wiccan, the pagan, and the goth and everything, and that influence that comes in through there. And they don't seem to have such a well, not overall, but some parts of America seem to be more leery of it than others, and they seem to be more accepting of it in the UK and in Europe because they're older cultures and they know the difference between things.
Well,
So
what
I have
years were you
of
blonde? What were the long-haired blonde years for you?
it went blonde. I was working in the amusement parks uh, in the late, for the whole later half of the 80s. And then I came out of that and started my cable show. And so it went blonde during the era of working in parks. And then I hit 1990 is when the cable show started. It ran till 96. So for 7 years. And during the time of the cable show, I just let it grow. It just,
Because I
went.
first saw a clip of it. First, it
Yeah, yeah.
reminded me of Nelson, one half of Nelson.
I
Remember
used to get that a lot at the time.
the
Yeah.
wasn't that Ricky Nelson's sons?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ricky Nelson.
in the 80s.
Yeah,
But when I looked at it more, you talk about the British influence. Remember in the 80s
yeah,
with Boy George and Culture Club, and he was friends with Marilyn.
yeah,
Remember Marilyn was the singer, and he had that long dark hair.
yeah.
He kind of
All
reminded
of
me of
that.
Marilyn.
That's like into Bowie there, and even before that, and then
Oh,
Adam Ant, which is a lot of all of that English rocker, glam rock, and early
right, because the glam
kind of.
rockers also contributed. I mean, not the glam, the like the early '80s Brit rockers, like the New Romantics.
Yes,
Like some of
yeah.
that was absorbed into the emerging goth look.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because goth and punk, you'll still see some of those early punk hairstyles that are indicative of punk, like the mohawk and everything, but you'll see those in the goth culture as well. Some
Mhm.
very extreme hair and big mohawks and things like
So, at
that.
what point did you shave it off? I mean, that's a big deal. Like for a woman who's always had long hair to cut it, I've talked to
Yeah.
women and they say that's a big deal. It's a psychological thing because people with long hair, sometimes a lot of their identity is wrapped up in that. What was that
Well, it
like
is.
when you cut it off? Were you so known for that? Psychologically, what did you go through to get to that point?
Well, it was you. Anytime you're in show business and stuff, you want to take a risk and you want to push the envelope, but you're also it's like I knew there were a lot of, especially a lot of the female audience that like dudes with long hair. So and I used to get, I mean, it was very androgynous too, and I had fun playing with the androgyny of it. I mean, with the eyeliner and the long hair, and I'm a slim dude who's not, big and bulky or anything. I would get mistaken for a woman and stuff like that. And I would even get, gay slurs thrown at me and things like that at times when you're in an atmosphere where that would happen. So, that androgynous look, which just let me know the androgynous look was working. And I liked it. I mean, I was fascinated by that and I had fun playing with that, especially in the context of show business and everything. And I liked it because even that in its own way was provocative. I mean, clearly. Um, so it got me to a point, but I was dyeing it, and I was dyeing it like blowing it out like Andy Warhol, blonde, and it got very fried from all the dyeing, and it was, just not looking so good and receding a little bit. And I was just like, I don't want to look like some aging rocker. So I just said, what am I going to do? And I always wondered what it would look like, you know? And I thought, could we do like the short spiky thing? And I said, screw it. Just, F all that. I'm just going to shave my head and go full on, what I like to call the Anton Lavey haircut. And for those of you who don't know Anton Lavey, he was the head of the Church of Satan, who was actually an old carny, who then, because that was full of celebrities and things like that. But so I call it the Anton
Lavey meets Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, yes, and there is some Crowley the same way. So it became more extreme, and that was at the time after the cable show, and it was it went on, and it was all that time after the culture of entertainment, like you say, Jim Rose had happened, things were a little harder, they had gone a little more industrial, and it's like goth and industrial and fetish BDSM all kind of converged in ways in music and culture, and certainly that came out in the fashion as well, and that fascinated me, and so I decided to do something really provocative in terms of my audience, and that was just to shave my head and just take it all off, and it because I was changing the look of the show anyway, it became more, because you went from it really was a big touch of androgyny, and looked like kind of one of those makeup rockers from the 80s or something like that carried on, and there was a lot of that look that carried on in that new romantic sense throughout goth, and then went very hard with it into that new look, which was, I wanted something that looked more futuristic too, more more futuristic and more extreme. And it also facilitated, like I say, with the dark magic, that shaved head kind of indicated that, like you say, with Crowley and others like that, and Anton Lavey, that look. Plus, my eyes don't match, and I'm wearing the eyeliner. So when I took all that off, the eyes really popped at that point.
Oh,
And
just like Bowie, you have different eyes.
yes, yeah, which is cool because Bowie's a huge influence on me. I love that dude. So in so many ways, and he
Well, it
inspired me
seems
as
like
well because
the new shaved head made you
Mhm.
more marketable as an actor.
Well, yes, because I think I would have been far more limited with long blonde hair, even though I could tie it back in a ponytail, and I was doing that a lot towards the end. So I think I was already getting ready for the change because I was sick of getting it stuck in my face, and when you're eating and things like that, I was just it had kind of timed out on me personally. So I was tying it back a lot and everything, and I think you're absolutely right. In my first few films, the item and a couple after that, I still had the long blonde. And
Right.
then I shaved it. And I think you're right. I think it makes me more marketable because especially now in the culture we're now, there are more roles for characters that are open to a shaved head, which is, I think, much easier to cast and get into different roles than it is. There's more specific, you're in a more narrow band, I think, with long hair. And if they want me in long hair again, and they've done this, they can put me in a wig. I mean, as long as it's a good wig, it works. I was in the beginning of
There's
Magnus, I'd already
nothing
shaved my head.
worse than a bad wig.
Oh,
Then all you look
yeah,
at is the bad wig.
you'll see
If you got like a toupee,
it, won't you
that's all
now?
people can concentrate on is the toupee. But I think
Yeah.
one thing that helped you when you started making movies is you had your own show. I think I call it public access TV. Some people call it cable access,
Well, it
cable.
was
What
it
did
was
you
what
call
they call local origination, which is
it? Like
just a
local
half a
access?
step local origination, which is just half a step above. When they would give you public access, they would give you cameras and allow you to edit, but they would give you gear and say, "Go make your show." And there, I had staff, I had camera people, I had directors, I had someone to edit with me, and I had their studio and all of their equipment. So I had a little more support than a typical public access show, which is why it looks a little better. There's more production value in it than you would get in a typical public access shows with a couple of guys and a camera and at home or wherever they were going to shoot, which is usually on location somewhere. We had a studio, and we did both. We shot on location and we cut that in, but we had a studio to shoot it in. So it was a little bit better, and it gave me a better experience because I had studio and I could sit in on all the editing because they wanted to to drive the edit, but I wanted to supervise the edit, and they allowed me to do that, which was great. And because I knew how to, but it's, you know, at the time we shot it on 3/4 inch videotape at the
I
time. They were
remember
still
back
into
in the
that.
day when people would channel surf and come across these shows like that, you
They
know,
would. I
those
was
local channels
and
where
yeah.
there was nothing else like it, and it would just be this mixed bag of, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is on TV. Who are these people? And I've never seen anything like this. It was kind of like a
Right.
little bit of the Wild West back then, you know, the pre-YouTube days, but
Yeah.
just for, you know, younger people who weren't even born back then. How would you
Hmm.
sum up those cable channels from back then?
Well, I think you put your finger on it exactly there. It was YouTube before there was YouTube. You know, we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the internet. So if you wanted, to have a TV show, you had to make it yourself. And at the time, all the rage was they made all these deals for the cable companies to get into your community. They came in saying, "Hey, we've got all this for you, and by the way, you can make your own local programming, and we'll give you a studio." So then there were all these local studios popping up because cable was all the rage, and to kind of, give the community as a perk, they gave them these studios and said people can come in and make their own programming and you can put it on the air, which gave the rise to, Wayne's World is a good example of that in movie form and everything, and it's been made fun of even in that. And I think there's a what is there? There's a goth talk or a goth show or something that they parodied on SNL too, I think.
Mhm.
So you've seen people have seen versions of it, even if they didn't see it originally. But it would be on up against, then they would take that programming and they would throw it on your cable access channel and on other local channels, and it would be just mixed in with all of the other cable channels. So you could literally people were like flipping by Saturday Night Live and Headbangers Ball on MTV at the time, and they were stopping to watch me because I was more interesting.
You
Which is
were. You were. And I think at the time, like 90% of these shows there were really kind of two people in chairs, like a talk show format,
yeah,
no decoration on the set, just very plain and very kind of forced. So to see your show that had, the set was decorated, it had a
yeah,
look. You brought in, didn't you like have a fridge and do cooking some of the time, and you had
yeah.
puppets, and you just had a lot of production value going on.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that was the idea, and that I think that's one of the reasons everybody stopped, because the only other show that had a decent production value, I thought, was the cooking show. And then we would go in and we would gank their set and then bring it in and shoot on their set, which they were fine with. But then we had stoves and all of that set when we wanted to go into the realm kitchen, the galley, and make some horrific thing with my cohort in crime, Pumpkinhead, who was our kind of resident nutty Martha Stewart, who wore a pumpkin mask and was pretty insane. And like you say, there were puppets and there was magic. So it was really, I refer to it sometimes as Pee Wee's Playhouse for big dead kids, because that's what it was. And when people late night would come across that, they would stop and go, "What the hell is this?" And I had them then.
Well, it also seemed like you had the freedom. If you
Yes.
wanted to do magic, you could do it that week. If you wanted to do cooking, did you just
Yeah.
feel that freedom, like you can just create whatever you wanted that week?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they rarely, if ever, yanked my chain. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of the platforms now where I couldn't, there no nudity or hard language or anything like that necessarily.
You
I
can
mean,
swear.
you could get away with a little bit, but you still had some community standards to adhere to,
Do it.
and I had a more structured time slot. Where on YouTube you can make something any length you want. I
So,
was
so
I
what
was
was your time slot, by the way?
largely, well, that's for the actual time slot when it ran.
Mhm.
Um,
Like,
in
did
the
you have
it's
a
funny,
regular weekly time slot?
I did. In the beginning, they made the mistake. They put me on Wednesday night right after a show called A Christian Perspective. So then I had this churchy audience rolling into me, and I'm like, who's the programming genius that did this crap? And they got a lot of blowback because that audience was not going to dig me. and they didn't like it. And I said, look, guys, move me to the weekend, make me the weekend party show. And when they moved me. I was on both Friday and Saturday night. It would repeat, or that we would run an older one once we had a library of shows. I was like 11 o'clock Friday and Saturday night, and I was the weekend party show. And if you were in high school or college, and I found out later their parents were watching it with them, and I didn't know that for the longest time. It was later when I got to meet more of my audience through horror conventions and other things that they told me that their parents would sit down and watch it with them, which was cool because it had a lot of music that appealed to them as well.
Well, one of the drawbacks of this kind of channel back then, they didn't have Nielsen ratings for it.
No.
And, people, on YouTube, they go by hit counters now, but
Yeah.
people at shows like yours, it was really hard to know how many people were watching you.
It was impossible to know. We had no numbers, and of course the cable companies had no interest in giving you any numbers. I mean, I was there at their good graces, and when they decided there would be no more local origination TV because they didn't need it anymore to sweeten the deal with local communities, because that they were being bought up by one after another, and after it had changed hands a couple of times. Corporate America finally just goes, oh, well, that looks like too much fun. Let's kill that,
Mm-hmm.
So all the cool.
And what city was this in? Was this East Coast or?
Oh, I wish. I've been told many times that if I had had my same career in New York or LA, I would really be somewhere now. I'm in Chicago, and this was actually in the south suburb of Chicago. That was made in a town called Park Forest, Illinois. Hello, everybody from Park Forest out there, if you're watching. And they had a cable
made
studio
there, but was it shown in the Chicago area too?
Yes, we ran in about 13 different communities throughout the kind of the southern and western suburbs. Even in Aurora, where the fictitious Wayne's World came from, we had run out there a few times. And then we would have to do what they called at the time bicycling your tapes into the city, because I had another producer that lived in the city, because you had to have a city representative to run it in the city of Chicago. So we would run it in, and
surprisingly, that's how a lot of the religious programs got on these channels, that they were maybe made nationally, but someone local there kind of sponsored it and signed up, but the national group would provide the tapes. Well, tell me, this is a long shot, but Chicago, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember a show? It was created in Chicago for, cable access, Miss Artificial Spring.
No.
It was half cooking show, half soap opera. And
wow.
Every episode they incorporated a cooking segment.
Yeah.
And I just remember back in the day, it was such a cool format because people weren't stretching the format. It was really rare to have a narrative on the cable channel, something that wasn't a talk show or nonfiction. So that was really rare. And it just, people like you also stretching that. But they're also just, people weren't testing the subject matter. Like you were saying, there's a lot of religious programming, or just, let's have a little debate show of local politics. People weren't going crazy with goth, punk, pushing sexuality, pushing the boundaries. So when anyone did that, there actually was blowback, or pushback, back in the day of, you felt kind of like, oh, we don't quite know the rules, but we're afraid of breaking them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you ever feel that you're going to push it too far and they were going to censor you?
Oh yeah, I mean, in those shows, it's like you pointed out, and that's been something I developed a long time ago. That vampire's kiss with that needle in the neck, that vampire piece, which was around before Jim Rose or anything like that. I developed that back in the late '80s, so that was very much featured on the cable show. Many times when I would do that performance. And that's something that was in that very first show that Christian audience that flowed over into me that first time they ran me did not like that kind of thing at all. It was too hardcore. Even when I performed that at the time, I had performed at the Magic Castle in Hollywood, and I did that there, and everybody was freaked out by it, because that's an effect that's been out in a different way in the magic community, but they had not seen anybody turn it into a fetishized vampire horror piece. And when I performed it at the Magic Castle, everyone was like, "You got to see the guy upstairs who's sticking needles in women," and it caused quite a controversy at the time. And that was certainly one of those things that was provocative in nature about that, especially putting it on television, on cable TV.
Well, when you did it on cable, did people complain to the cable channel?
Not when when I was in front of the wrong audience, yes. When they finally moved it around and my audience found me on television, no, they're fine with it. They're looking for something different. They were looking for something weird and outrageous and fun.
Once you
Dark,
were
sticky
on and
fun.
established, did you get people who would contact you wanting to be on your show?
Lots. Yeah.
And
Lots of
who
bands.
are the types of people that wanted to? Was it other magicians? Was it goth kids? Who was it?
The magicians that I brought on, and they were friends of mine. So they were happy to come on and get a little feature and hang out with me and do that. And there was only like maybe one of them that was really, in the same neighborhood of darker and more cutting edge performance like I'm into. Everybody else was pretty much just, straight kind of magic. But I have my one friend that he brought a tiger onto the show and everything, and he made it a tiger appear. So I had a lot of kind of mainstream magic on, and that was my invitation. The people that actually showed up wanting to be on were people that were more into the gothy fun, and they wanted to be on and be featured on the show. And it was some of like young goth and grunge and alternative bands. Were always looking for. They were smart. They were always looking for a venue, and they wanted a
Did you
weird
ever have
place.
the bands on?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And I had a band on that I actually toured with for a while called the Dark Theater, and they were a goth band, and we'd actually gone on the road with them at times. So that was fun. And so I had Vlad, and Vlad had been on a lot of shows because he did the vampire thing. And they had him on like Ricky Lake and other places like that, talking about blood drinking and everything. And then that helped him promote the band and the music. And then we would go out and do shows together. And that was one example.
The whole thing about these cable channels, the people who work there, I think, all secretly want to be filmmakers. But this is like their next best thing, so they're playback operators or doing administrative. A lot of cool people, but I always think, okay, they want to do what you're doing. Were there people actually there in the studio who worked for the cable company that really appreciated that you were going out on a limb creatively? Or were they like, oh my God, who are these people? Or did you find they secretly wanted to do what you were doing?
I think they secretly wanted to do it. They loved working with me on the show. I made it pleasant and I made it fun, and the show was weird, dark, sticky fun, and they gravitated towards that because they want to do something different and they want to do something that was fun. And those talking head shows are not fun. They're drudgery to shoot. They're boring as hell. You got two people in chairs and a plastic plant between them, and they are for an hour. So
Between the Ferns.
Yes. Yes.
What's that show called? That's another example of where they parodied a cable access show.
Fernwood Tonight, wasn't that it? Yeah.
No, the one. It's
Or was Mary Hartman? Was that it? There was like a couple.
No, this was more recently where some Hollywood actor did a talk show. Wasn't it called like Between Two Ferns or something? But he made it really stilted, like a public access talk show.
Right. Something like that. I don't know if I've seen it. I'd love to see something like that. It's interesting. You get a little bit of that on YouTube, although now everybody has the technology. I mean, I was talking. It's like with the platform that I use, to do live streams and the things that I have. It's like everything we used to have a cable studio for. I have it, right here at the Batcave, right here at home.
Well, tell me, don't you think that we always thought we didn't have nice equipment. Now people do for YouTube, but it's not just the technology. I see kids on YouTube who are so savvy, who just seem like they came out of the womb knowing how to host a show. That's what
Yeah.
really gets me, is just how good they are, like when they're in high school.
Well, I think those people were always out there, but they didn't have a chance. I mean, when you had to go, because it's like to get in, you had to go take certification, like this, 8-week course and how to use their equipment and all this stuff, which is fair enough. They want to know you're serious. So there's a little bar to entry, and they want to know you know what they're doing, so you're not going to wreck their equipment. So there was a little bar to entry in there. But I had seen people go through those, even those certification classes, and then either they were crew on somebody else's show or they would just vanish after a while. They did
Right.
not keep up with it.
But
And
isn't the
now,
reason for that? It is
hmm,
so much work. Even something
yeah,
that seems simple in the studio with not, a ton of editing like other shows, just to
yeah,
get your crew and your cast to come on time,
yeah.
to be ready and energized to work. It takes so much commitment. And for you, it sounds like you were everything: actor, host, producer. I mean, it just seems like it has to be the force of one person's will to make all this happen.
It does, because without me, I mean, and I wanted it to happen. I mean, I wanted to be on TV, and I didn't know how to pitch TV or write a proposal or anything. I'd been on the news a little bit and featured on some other shows, but not as much as I have since I now know how to pitch the media. Uh, I figured if the easiest way to get on TV was to make my own damn show, and I knew that I had to learn. I mean, and I studied, theater and television and some graphic design and communications in college. So I had trained for that, so I was serious about it. I educated myself, and I went in to go do that, and that was my entry point into really making my own show. Nobody's going to give me my own damn show at that point. Nobody knew who I was, and it was weird. What I wanted to do was unusual. So luckily, I had local origination cable TV where I had a studio and a staff, and I could go in and make this weird crap,
Because
and
back
everybody loved
then,
it.
some people would use that as a launching pad and actually get, picked up for syndication or national show. Not that often, but some
Yeah.
people did. Was that always in the back of your mind that you'd get, like, say, a syndication deal?
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to. We even did other. I had cut a couple of like demos to try and get it out on other either syndication or our local other channels,
Hmm.
and wanted to go further. And I had even pitched. I'd sent a proposal and sent and signed a disclosure about that thick with MTV to get them to look at it, because I figured if they've got Tom Green on there sucking on the teat of a goat and they find that entertaining, I've got a lot more to offer, frankly. So,
No,
but
you're
I
right.
mean,
'Cause the closest to that at the time really was MTV when they
yes,
started these other programs, especially Jackass
yeah,
was so kind of of that era.
yeah. And I had the music element strongly, in embedded in the show. So I thought we had a good shot at it. And then they had programs at the time like 120 minutes, and that was very much focused on alternative music and goth music, darker shades of music. So I thought we had a good shot. I think the proposal could have been a lot better, and I would have pitched it different. But I mean, that's with this brain I have now. I know how to make that pitch better. You know.
Well, another thing
I
that
know.
you have going for you is, if you were just channel surfing and just saw you for a split second,
Yeah.
it kind of resembled the classic horror movie host. Especially, every
Yes.
local station had a horror movie host, show old horror movies on the weekend, usually a
Absolutely.
Dracula kind of character. And
Oh
it almost
yeah.
seemed like you were a modern cyber goth version of that.
And that's a lot of what I drew on. I definitely have a lot of horror host in my blood in there. Definitely. Because I grew up with Svengoolie and others, and and I've gotten to meet her many times now, Elvira. You can't not love some Elvira.
Yeah.
And so I grew up watching that stuff and other horror hosts that I could find, And so there's definitely horror host in that, because it's like what I did with the illusion show, especially when I turned a corner and went, and let myself out of the cage and started to let the influence of horror and horror stories and sci-fi and comic books and all that darker fun into the show. Then I had to find new markets, because the people that were booking me before weren't looking for that. It was a nice, polite family show before that, and now I had this weird show that was really meant for contemporaries and older kids, and over, at least over 13 or over 21. When I was did a lot of nightclubs and stuff back in the early days, as well as amusement parks, which was again made for a more general audience. But the stuff I was doing on my own was more edgy, and so that took me into different places, and that definitely had a horror host appeal to all of that, and was part of the influence on all of that, along with the horror movies themselves. So there is that, and in fact, I even took part, because I hosted a couple of movies. I even, for one episode of the cable show, we just sat back with myself and the cast and hosted Attack of the Giant Leeches. That old B movie classic, and had great fun doing that. And then we would roll in horror movie trailers, for fun, for B-roll on things and stuff like that. So, as part of my love and my homage to, classic horror and the things that had come before that. So there was always a very strong horror element, because when I had turned that corner, I was then booking a lot of haunted attractions and dark events, goth clubs, things like that. So that's where I went with it to sell my live show, and that was the audience for it. And since then it's been.
Did you ever use this as a platform, besides horror movies or bands, just people in these communities? Like, did you ever give your kind of sheltered audience a glimpse into say the tattoo artists, piercing artists, the BDSM community? Because, and again, we just take it all for granted now, but there was still a certain exoticness to it back then, and just having a guest like that you could just talk to one-on-one was kind of special.
Yeah, well, we did. We we did some profiles of some gothic personalities that were fans of the show, and one of them, her name was Lucretia. We actually went out to her house and shot a segment there where she showed us her whole spooky house and everything like that. And that was quite fun. So we did. We delved into that, not nearly enough into the BDSM or the piercing and tattoo world or anything like that, because that was still during the cable show. That was still coming to prominence alongside of Jim Rose and all of that. So we didn't get into that nearly as much as I would have liked to.
Right.
But
well,
we did get into the personalities.
Especially early 90s, right when, home internet was about to come out, but still before a lot of places to shop online. Just describe a little bit, what was it like to get, a PVC, jacket, and just to get, gigantic Doc Marten, boots, that laced up to your thighs. And, I think just people take for granted the full access we have, and also just the knowledge to know that stuff existed back then. How would you even, learn about these fashions, and how would you, buy them, and how would you just get like-minded people together when you couldn't just go into a chat room just to, make connections with these people?
Well, you said you would meet and network in person. It's like when I would play clubs, a lot of goth clubs, nightclubs, things like that. I would learn where the stores were, and lucky enough, being in Chicago, the third major market, we had stores and places like that, downtown, like the 99th floor and other places like that, where we could go and shop for that, because you didn't have online back then. You had to go buy it, usually in person. And when I would travel, I would, if it was to a bigger location, I would find other stores like that. And then the other way to do it is to make it yourself. And I had a very talented girlfriend at the time who is still my wardrobe mistress to this day, years later. And she has made me a lot. She's very talented. And she has made me a lot of custom wardrobe and props, because she's super crafty. In fact, she goes by the Crafty Mistress. You can find her on Facebook. So
But wasn't there an excitement back in the day when you discovered something? Because the hunt was so much more
yeah,
difficult.
yeah, yeah. It meant more when you found something, when you had a good score, when you could find something, or and we used to even go thrifting at the time and find strange, exotic pieces, sometimes thrifting, and then you would either paint them or reconstruct them or something like that, or take a couple of things and then, put them back together or blend them. So there was that happening too, which was a great way to source some
Well, the
strange
irony
fashion.
always was, sometimes you have to wait for Halloween to come around. Even though you
There's
want to wear
that
the
too.
stuff year round,
Yeah,
suddenly there's a little bit of a variety of,
yeah.
vampire capes and velvet and vinyl, or you just go to, the sex shops. And ironically, you didn't necessarily want, hot pink and yellow, but you'd hope, you could at least find, some PVCs, some vinyl pants, or, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Where it's like you're just taking whatever scrap was out there.
Well, yeah, you would find it, and I would also find a lot of that through. I would shop like the National Halloween Costume and Party Show,
Hmm.
and then they had the vendors there that actually made and that's I think where I first found, Shrine of Hollywood and things like that, who are a big, glorious manufacturer of beautiful pieces of gothware and things like that. So you would discover them however you could, but it was all in person then, because that was all just still pre-internet and into internet. It's like the year the cable show went off, where we stopped making regular shows, was in like right after Halloween in '96, and then the next year in '97, I had a website and went online. And if we'd had email, and we didn't have YouTube or any of the delivery system or anything we have now, but if I had YouTube, then I would have been running them on local cable and then immediately turning them to digital and putting them online. And we would have had a huge audience built up from that. And I'm still approached, even years later after I shaved my head and everything, locally, I'm still approached by people who remember the show fondly from all those years ago. And I'm shocked. I'm thrilled that I made something that had, that endured, and that they remember fondly. But I am shocked that my weird little cable show had that much of an impact.
Now, are you still in
Yeah,
the Chicago area?
I am. Yes.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
well,
I
another
travel the
thing,
extent I can, not right now, but I can when we can travel again. I will be. Yeah.
um, magazines were so important back then.
Yes.
And, we're talking about mail order, trying to find things, but just for culture, whether it's a local magazine just to meet, like-minded people, or a national one to learn about trends. But that also
Yeah.
tied into, say you wanted to compile your cable access show onto video, where would you sell it?
Right.
VHS, you'd put an ad in the back of these magazines, and to discover other people's work back then, or, the very independent shot on VHS world, or where there was
Huh.
band, concert videos. But what was just your memory of like the magazines that you read back then?
Oh, there was a lot. There was a lot of different, gothic magazines, things like that. And then that was also in the area when, remember, zines, just,
Zines, yeah.
small pamphlet-like zines were big then. And we even put our own out for a little while. Um,
What was your zine?
and I'm trying to remember. I think it was just called The Realm or something like that. And or News of the Realm. And it featured, again, my girlfriend is a great artist, and she did a lot of artwork and things like that. We had photography in it, and we had, little features of things. We would write some things. We would take some curated, submissions and things like that. But I remember at one point, I was working a haunted attraction, and it was in Indiana, and I had we had merch at the show, and of course, and a lot of times we had the zines there at the time because the cable show was still running concurrent with that. And I said, well, don't put the zines out at this show. and the girl that was running our booth misunderstood that. She put everything out, and the zine had kind of some provocative stuff inside of it. Not super provocative by the nature now, but the kid that bought it was he was underage clearly, and I think he was about 10 or 12 or something, and it was considered too provocative for him by his mother, and I wound up on the front page of an Indiana newspaper because of
God.
that. Oh yeah, a nice little bit of infamy, which it all blew over, and it didn't mean anything later. But somebody wanted to be outraged by something, and it was no big deal. And it's like, and there they are holding my zine on the front page of the newspaper, and I'm like, thanks for the advertising, way to go, you know. And it did,
Well,
and
one
it
thing
sold
about
zines.
zines was,
It actually made it more popular.
yeah,
So
and it was just a way like people would trade them, and it was kind of almost like the thing. People didn't normally even do it for money. They did it
yeah.
to make connections or to express their art.
It was, and that like you say, when you went to magazines and then the zine culture, then, and that was because we didn't have the internet and blogs or anything like that yet, because that was kind of what came next after that. It was like an extension of the evolution of that. But that's what we had then, was kind of those zines, and that was a great way to find those things, whether it was fashion or whether it was like poetry or culture, and then sometimes you would find other cool bands and entertainers like myself in those things. So yeah, it was an interesting kind of scene, and you still see a few zines now, but not so much because it's really all online. I mean, that's where all the action is.
Did you save copies of all your old zines?
I've archived the crap out of everything. Yeah,
Good.
probably
How
more
many
than I
do you think
should.
you made total?
Hmm?
How many zines did you put out total?
I have to go back and look. We only did it for a limited amount of time because after a while, everything changed. You had the internet, and it just petered out. It was just kind of timed out. It was the end of it. So I don't. I mean, there was a good few. We were trying to crank out like maybe one a month for a while to run concurrently, run alongside the cable TV show. I was looking for, because the cable studio, they didn't pay you. I didn't make any money from that. It was good for branding. It was good for getting the word out about my live shows, and they let me promote what I was doing live. But I didn't make a dime unless I was, selling a ticket to a show or a T-shirt or a zine or something like that. So that was part of the way we were able to monetize the show at that point, because nobody was. You talk about a labor of love again, like you did earlier. You had to love that show for all the work, and you had to be prepared to go do it without a paycheck involved in the show itself. It was
Well, when you're
all
doing that, you're
that.
doing cable access, a
Hmm.
lot of work, the zine, maybe doing shows that you get paid something. But overall, any independent performer like that, it's kind of like being in a band. You always get to
Yeah,
the point of burnout, and you think, where is this getting me? It's so much work.
right.
And, Hollywood's not knocking on your door. What were your points like back in the 90s when you just said, is this worth it?
Well, when the corporate, after they were changing hands and everything with the cable studio and everything, and they didn't need to sweeten anybody's deal anymore, and they took away really all the local programming, and they kind of unceremoniously pulled the plug, which was, at least we got to do our last Halloween special, and we got that in, and then they did rerun some specials in some of the show for a while after that, so it had a tailing off effect. But when they ended it, I was already thinking, how long am I going to do the show? Either it transitions into something new, and I'm able to sell, because we were cutting the pilots and things to try and turn it into a legitimate show on somebody's network or something at that point, or move on with it. But I was just creatively, I was like, this is fun. We've got an audience, but unless there's something else to do with it, and if we were a little further into the internet, I would have just moved it online and continued to do that, I think, for a while. But fortunately, I had all that on-camera experience and everything, and I had some acting training in my past, which I had just studied theater and acting simply for the stage show, to make my illusion show better, because I think magic and illusion is better when it's in a theatrical context. All of the street magic and stuff, that's fine, but I'm a guy that's more of a stage guy, and I like big illusions, and I like some spectacle, and I like theater and some drama in it. So I studied that for what I wanted to do with it. And it was a good thing I did, because it was like right at the end of the cable TV show. That's when I was offered two films, one by John Lechago, one by Dan Clark, who wrote and directed and also stars in The Item. And so it was funny, but it was at that point I transitioned into indie film, like almost immediately.
Mhm.
And it was like the universe going, okay, time to shift, time to move on.
Mhm.
And that's what got me into horror films and dark sci-fi and dark genre, indie film. And I love that. And at that point I was like, okay, well, the cable show may be done, because I was really wanting to pivot that, and make it more of a real show somewhere, not just on a limited, jurisdiction of a cable, local cable show, but move on with it. And then all of a sudden I found I was in indie film, and I thought, well, this is good, because that allows me, these things were, especially at the time, we're still getting worldwide releases on home video and everything like that. And now, of course, everything that's streaming, that you can go on in your worldwide streaming in many cases. But I felt like I was able to, it served the same audience. The same audience will come and see my cable show or my live show will also come and see me in a horror film. So when I got to transition into acting, that's where I went next.
Right.
And
So right now,
and I,
is that your biggest artistic outlet right now, is your acting?
well, it's equal. I kind of split the time between on stage, except for right now, I'm not doing anything. What I'm doing live is live streaming and putting out a lot of content online. And there's more and more opportunities from that, from YouTube and live streaming and the platform I use. We can go on multiple platforms at the same time.
And then
And,
tell
and,
me
and
about that, because
yeah,
I know you recently did, and I have to look at my note, so I want to
yeah,
get it right. A live stream called Poe
the
Show,
post show.
tribute to
Yeah,
Edgar Allan Poe, and that was just a couple weeks ago. Is
yeah.
that the kind of example of more things you want to create for YouTube?
It's one of them. Yeah. Yeah. I like doing the live streams. I'll probably do more produced pieces. We're looking at more editing, editing more of it right now. But it's fun
So do
because
you
the
want
live
to do more
streams,
original programming? I know you've shown some of your old cable show on
yeah,
YouTube, taken older things, but is your thrust right now you want to create new original videos for YouTube?
that's part of it. That's part of a two-part plan. It's like I actually want to do, as things open up again, I do want to do more acting, but I would like to take my 20 years of experience in indie film and go out and get, some roles in larger projects that people will see, where I don't have to be the only one worrying about the distribution of it, where it's somebody else's project and I can go bring my persona and my skills to that.
So you want to be an actor for hire in a lot more movies.
Yes. And alongside still doing that, alongside the live show, as things open up again to do more the live Gothic Illusion show, because I think the two of them go together well, because clearly the things I'm looking for and the things that are going to cast me are still all of that, horror and dark genre and things like that. And the great thing is, with all the streaming services now, there are more opportunities for casting than ever in those kind of shows.
Well, I used to think I was pretty savvy, but I feel really old right now when it comes to YouTube. And I think
Really?
it's because I'm locked in this 80s, 90s, Hollywood mindset of, oh,
Yeah.
this is how this works. Whereas, teenagers now, they don't have that baggage and they zero right in on the strengths of YouTube and know
Yeah.
how to use it and engage an audience. And they're
Yeah.
really good at building a following. And I know
Yeah.
part of that is the viewers of YouTube are just young. People want to look at shows of people their age. If you're a
Hmm.
girl in
Yeah.
high school, you want to watch another high school age girl talk about, what concerns them. And it could be for any specialty, or if you're into computer programmer, you want to watch a computer programmer that knows their stuff. So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, what have you kind of let go of that old model? Who's inspiring you now to think, yeah, I can actually format a show that right now I can fit in my persona, I can, use what I am, but
Yeah.
I have to be open to new video formats.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering what would be the best vehicle for you to take everything that has been, the master magician and this whole
Yeah.
persona, but to bring it to a new generation on YouTube.
Well, it is. Part of it is reaching down in and trying to reach younger viewers, but a lot of them do want to watch contemporaries because they get that and they understand that. Some of them like what I'm doing, but my the people that like me from what I'm seeing from my stats, it's about 60% female to male, and it seems to be, the demographics is a little older, clearly because they want to watch their contemporaries as well,
Mhm.
and so that winds up being more like, in the larger sense, like 25 to like 55, but then the highest concentration, like, you know, uh, you know, like 30 to 45, somewhere in there, in the middle of that kind of. There seems to be a specific kind of bell curve kind of to that demographic where it's larger in the middle. So that's kind of where my audience is.
Well, does that
And
audience communicate with you and tell
yes,
you what kind of
yeah.
programming they want from you?
Oh yeah, yeah. I clearly like it because what I've been able to do with the live streams, it's almost recreating the cable TV show with elements of that, but
Mhm.
rolling in the video, pre-produced video in live, and hosting it live. And the difference is now, I mean, because I had done several live broadcasts back when I was doing the cable TV show. We did like three like very long, like 2 3 hours of programming at night that were live. We were on live with the audience. We could take phone calls and things like that. And that was the closest we had to a live interaction with the audience. Everything else was kind of, through a PO box and through meeting them at shows later. So we had three occasions where we did go live. We could take phone calls and interact with them and have people even, run down to the cable studio and win something and appear on camera and everything. So we did some really fun stuff with that, but we were limited in what we could do because they weren't going to let me go live every time.
Mhm.
It was a big production. It was a big deal to do that then. But we did it and it was successful. In fact, it was so successful that even when the show was over, they had to take the phone off the hook because that was still at the time when your phone was plugged into a wall. um,
Right.
and they had to take the phone off the hook because it would not stop ringing. People continued to call in even after the show was over because they wanted to talk to us.
Well,
So
did
that was
you
very
then for your live post show
cool.
allow for people to ask you questions on the screen while you
Exactly.
show?
And that's where I was getting to, is at that point that now I can live interact with them in the chat and even send them a code to bring them up if they want to come on their phone, and let me, video chat with them. I can bring them right up in, not just a scheduled guest, a special guest. Like on that show, I had Alpha from House of Dawn, who I do
Yeah,
music
that was
projects.
a great interview.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I was starting to worry that it was getting a little too long for the audience, but everybody hung and everybody really enjoyed it. And I love giving them a platform because I think they're so good. They deserve, more audience, and they've helped me out so much because they did the score and so much of the soundtrack to Dark Realm, along with a lot of other really great independent artists.
Mhm.
Like Sinister Fate and Aurelio Voltaire and others are in there, but Housemaid of Dawn did so much of that, and
Well, so
I'm
you
really grateful. So
continued that because post show, it's got the built-in sort of classic romantic goth feel, but with you, horror, magic, music.
yeah,
I mean, do you want to narrow that down to a sharper focus? Do you want it to be general enough to include everything? I mean, do you see yourself using YouTube to host a show just to invite the people on who inspire you? Is that kind of your format?
yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting to, is doing more long form, live stream or even recorded interviews.
Mhm.
But I really want to. I love, because I'm part of it, and I know it, and I love it. I just love weird dark shit, and I love that stuff. And I want to
Dark's
explore
fun.
dark, sticky fun. Well, yeah, and I am. I'm the master of the dark realm, master of dark, sticky fun. So I consider myself really somebody who loves to explore dark culture, which is kind of the umbrella term for all of that. You know, whether it's horror or the paranormal or sci-fi.
because there's
Yeah,
so much out there. There's Vice, and there's so many of these niche shows on YouTube now, which is kind
yeah,
of funny because it's almost like making it almost too out there, you know?
yeah.
It just there's no mystery anymore. But I think one thing you have is not that you're old, but I say elder spokesperson, meaning that you
Yeah,
did it in a way that these young people haven't. To them, it's all just being a voyeur from their computer screen, and there's still value in someone who has lived this during certain time periods.
absolutely.
Do you find that young
Yeah.
people like want to come to you to say, "Hey, back in the '90s, what was
Mhm.
the scene like?"
Yeah. Well, I found that's one of the things that ranks highest on the as far as the new video I've been adding to the YouTube channel. People are enjoying the old cable TV show, and it's like the biggest hits right now seem to be the old cable TV show, me on my modern television appearances where I am performing gothic illusion on television like on WGN here in Chicago, who I'm very grateful to. They've been very awesome to me and have me on almost every Halloween and other spots in the year. And so they like that. And then they also like the live streams are ranking very high right now. So I think, to be somebody who's been there, done that, and now I can, and it gives me a little more gravitas to be able to, bring it out and go, okay, let me take you into the world of dark culture because I've been there, I live there, I do this, and here are the other weird, dark, and sticky people I think you should know about. So yeah, that seems to be the genesis of what that has come to be.
Because
And I
here's the
even
thing that I
enjoyed.
think could distinguish you. You can learn nuts and bolts on Wikipedia. You can find out
Yeah,
anything, but only you can tell your firsthand experience. Only
yes,
you can tell a Ron Fitzgerald story.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and I haven't seen too much of that because I think your formats are you're interviewing other people and you want to, bring them out. But
hmm,
it seems like you probably have a lot more stories in you and anecdotes from back in the day. Have you thought of creating a format where you could share more of that?
yes, and I will be. It's like we were talking about. That's why I come out and do these interviews like what we're doing today. I really appreciate somebody else drilling down into what I've done because you're going to ask me stuff that and frame it in a way I wouldn't necessarily do it because you're an outside perspective, and I really appreciate that, and thank you for having me on. But that allows me to kind of see get a look at how you and others see it, and then also putting it out there and testing it. It's like anybody else on YouTube or on the internet. See what content are people liking and are they coming to see that and then go there. And so I'm exploring more of that to put more of that. I have video footage of me that is still being we're still translating into digital that goes all the way back to my one of the first shows I ever shot. I was 16 years old on stage,
Oh
and
wow.
that's when I created the name Fitzgerald's Realm of Magic, and it went from there. So I have a lot to unpack and go in there, which is why I'm started the process. I'm now engaged in writing a book about that as well, of how I went from the boy next door to the boy next door gone horribly wrong, and going from that kid with a box of magic to the master of the dark realm, and how that took me off into performing and how I changed my persona and how that got me the cable TV show and then into film and acting.
Mhm.
And then how that all kind of came around together, in Dark Realm, because Dark Realm, I've also made that project kind of side by side to put the acting and the magic, the illusion, all in one place together, which makes it a very
You're at
different
a place
film. And
where you're not just preserving your own history, and it
yeah,
really sounds like that's the frame of mind you're in right now,
some of
especially
it,
when you can still remember it.
yeah. Well,
That's the
I
sad
mean,
thing.
one of
We find out, you know, 20 years from now, it's probably going to be a lot easier today to
yeah,
start writing down all these stories, and especially too, and I hate to say it, but and again, we're similar ages, but to
Yeah,
be around the people that you lived it with, to be able to talk to them while they're still around, jog your
yeah,
memory. And I think it's not just your story, but you're also preserving the stories of the people that worked with you. And I think
absolutely.
you may not realize it, but they're probably looking to you to give them their little piece of history.
Some of them are definitely, and I've already lost some of them along the way too. I mean, as we all have, but so yeah, it is some of that. Part of it is amplifying that. It's like taking that story that I wasn't able to get out on larger platforms at the time, and now I can put out to a worldwide audience, whoever cares to to come to it. And
Do you
so
have
there
a
is.
close friend that when you write all this down,
Mm,
you can give them the manuscript and not to check for typos, but to say, was this really how I remember it? I mean, do you have in your mind these people that will be able to read this and just, know if you
yeah.
captured that or not?
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. I have some people I would definitely, some friends I would let look at it, and as well as, it's essential, I think, to have an editor for something like that too, because I definitely want it in my voice, but, without it going into multiple volumes or anything, is we could kind of tell the story of how I became the master of the Dark Realm. There is a lot to unpack, and that I might do it in several different ways.
Hmm. I mean, do you have kids?
No,
So this
not
is
that I know.
a big part of your legacy. I think the things you're creating, your book, your
Yeah.
YouTube,
Mhm.
there's a lot that this is going to represent for you. I mean, does that put a little extra pressure on you?
Uh, no, I don't. I really don't let it. I look at it as more of a labor of love than anything else,
Hmm.
because alongside that, I want to do exactly what you're talking about. I want to, now that I have a little more gravitas, a little more elder statesman kind of feel to it, that, then taking people to explore, dark culture is one side of that, while I kind of tell the story of how I got here myself, which kind of lends credence to being able, to having people follow me into that culture now, and continuing to explore it myself, because it continues to grow and evolve, and there's more things out there that even I need to discover. And that as that starts, more people have brought other new things to me. But there's that, and then how I was involved in kind of the history of a lot of that as it came up in my part of it anyway. And but no, I don't feel it. I feel a want and a need to do it. I don't necessarily feel a fire under my ass about any pressure about doing it. It's more of a labor of love, something I want to do.
Or at
My
least
career
a chance
says,
for you to get it right. So,
yeah,
so it's not going to be secondhand news. You can, in your own voice, set the
exactly.
record straight.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I think that's it. I think that's the essential thing, is not to, I guess if there was anything there, it's like, if you're going to leave it to anyone else, we know, without any large extended family or anything, if you're going to leave it to anything else, it's going to be people who didn't know you, or somebody who discovers you after
Hmm.
the fact or something. And then, if you want to be able to, put your actual influence on what you've done, then you should do it yourself like that. And that's part of why I'm doing it. Part of it is just to kind of like tell people what I've done, that I wish were there in the first place, which I can kind of leverage that now by telling the story at
Hmm.
this point. As I move forward on the other half, I don't want to just stay there and relive that. I want to
Hmm.
share that, because I think there's interesting stuff there, but I also want to move forward with exploring more of that dark culture, and performing and acting myself in new things. I mean, I don't see anything in somebody's age where it times us out. I mean, we're all likely to be here for twice as long, or with technologies that will emerge even longer than that. We could be here a lot longer than we think about. Conversely, you could be gone tomorrow if you step out in front of the wrong bus. So it's good to do that and to archive it and do it. But I'm more interested in exploring forward, as well as telling what got me here. I'm even fascinated, because it seems to go in chunks, in phases. It's like one thing led to another, and it's like Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots going backwards, and that seems very true because then you can see, well, this led me to this, and this led me to this, and this led me to this. When you're mired down at the time, you're going, you might be looking for your next direction, but as you go back, then it's very clear to me how everything was connected and it kind of flowed together. So now I'm in a point where, I have this technology, we have the internet, and I have a way to continue to do what I do, but also to kind of tell the backstory of it. It's like Star Wars and then the prequels. We'll see if it all comes out interesting.
If you write
As long as the sequels are better than what
autobiography,
yeah.
Have you picked a title for it?
Yeah, I'm not going to share it right now, but yeah, I have definitely got a title for it.
And is it going to be more of a long autobiography, or is it just going to be like about a specific time in your life?
I think it's going to be more about, well, it'll be a biography, but specifically on some of those, like I was saying, some of those segments of my life, that got me from one place to the next, and then kind of exploring what was next, but not in explicit, gory, excruciating detail all the way, because I think that can be too long. There'll be some of that in there, but then exploring those phases that kind of got me to where I am now in a way that's interesting to people and kind of hits the highlights of things. And at that point, to go in and maybe do another piece or something else afterwards, I almost think it'd be more of a documentary, which I'd love to make myself, but I don't know if it's weird. To do a documentary on yourself, I don't know. I need other partners because you need some outside eyes and some distance on that. Because if you're telling your own story, and I certainly could, but I almost think it's kind of weird to do it almost docu-style, but about yourself. It's almost like, I don't know, we have reality television now, but that's not even real. That's not really telling anybody's real story. That's a lot of manufactured crap, but using that kind of.
Well, someone did. It's always interesting. People know the Gothic you, the magic, the acting.
Yeah.
What are the parts people don't know about you, or that would surprise them?
Right, and that's the other things that would go into it. It's like, a lot of people don't know. I love to cook, things like that. It's something you don't necessarily see. You see a little bit of it. I did in the holiday, the Christmas live stream. I did a Jingle Bats part of that where I'm making bat cookies for Christmas. But there's other things. We've got some other kind of food, weird and gothic-y and strange food segments that we want to bring up, because you see a lot of like kind of gothic DIY, not necessarily a lot of weird, fun cooking ideas necessarily. So that's something. There's one thing, and then there's some other stuff, in my personal life, and even what some of what drives me and some things behind it, because there is another story behind the story. That gets into my health and a point I hit in my life that really I'm lucky to be here at this point at all, and very grateful to still be here to explore and do all this. So if there is any sort of motivation to do that, it's because kind of that. I think I feel like I was I was spared and I got to move along because I'm supposed to be doing this. It clearly something or somebody, the universe wants me to go off and continue to do this and tell this tale. So I intend to do exactly.
You have a few personal demons to share, as well as some fun things too. You've got a variety.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because so much of art is tempered by and influenced by the artist's personal story, which doesn't always have to be tragic, but it is certainly got an overcoming the long odds kind of sense to it, which a lot of us have been through. Everything's relative. Everybody's had things in their life that are challenging to them, and maybe they were lucky to get through. and it's relative to everybody's life and what they've been through. But I had a big health challenge and a change and everything that changed everything. I mean, it cost me my relationship. It almost did me in. I was lucky to pass go and collect $200 and keep going at that point. And like I say, I'm eternally thankful for it. And I do want to talk about that too, because thus far I haven't. Just because it's like we talked about before, everything's on the internet and everybody overshares. I like to retain a little bit of mystery about myself. And I think there are some things that's important in a performer's and a public person's life to keep to themselves, to keep for yourself, because you don't want, you have to keep something for you. Not everything's up, for public consumption. And nor does it need to be. But especially because of the business I'm in the business of mystery and dark, sticky fun. So I also think it's part of me not wanting to water it down or even muddy the water or burden my audience with what I had been through to bring this to them. I've always wanted people to appreciate what I do for what it is, and largely they have. And what I've been through is enough that it would certainly, I think, why I want to talk about it, because I think it would inspire people to push through, the hell and broken glass they might have to push through in their own life. But I also don't want that to be a burden and to be too much of a focus on how it colors what I do. You know what I mean?
Well, so at this point, a couple decades into goth and just your persona and whatnot,
Yeah.
it sounds like you still get something out of that. It still seems like that is an important part of you. I'm just curious, what do you still get out of goth culture, and is that still something that you strongly identify with?
Yeah, well, I feel, and it's personal and it takes on different flavors and different people, in how how they use it and how much of that they use. Like I'm not, totally doing the pale make. I'm certainly pale, but that's kind of natural. And I'm doing some eye makeup, the eyeliner and things like that. But I'm not doing the extreme, pale look and things like that. But it's certainly an influence on my look and my personal taste and my style, definitely. So I do. I still love it. I love to explore it. I love to see what others are doing with it now. I love to see how it has evolved over time and where it is now and who's in that culture and community. Even though I don't feel like even though I've been kind of labeled, and that was part of that label was kind of through the media and my audience as a Gothic illusionist. I don't even know that term in itself completely defines what I do, but at least it gives the audience, especially those who don't know me, it gives them idea that this is not just your grandma's magic show. It is not that I am in somewhere in the dark ether in there exploring that you're not going to get something that's just normal pedestrian polite entertainment. You're going to get something that's specifically dark and weird and fun. So the term is good. So I love goth culture, even though some of goth culture I'm sure would immediately just adopt me because of what I do, or even maybe because of my look or anything like that. Because it uses that and it loves it, and I love the music, and it's influenced heavily by it. But it is its own thing, and some of them might identify with it, and some of them might not. So I do love it, and I do. It's just kind of me. I just feel like I'm kind of almost a strange version of almost like I don't know, more of an entertainment eccentric or something like that. More like a Gomez Adams type kind of, because I love that weird dark culture. Like so many of those people in the world of horror and goth love that dark, strange culture, because that's where they live. That's what they like. That's what pleases them. And it doesn't mean that it's humorless, and it doesn't mean that it's dark and desperate or anything. But it does mean that is their style, and that is the kind of fun they like to frame out. That just it becomes like a I guess more of a lifestyle choice than anything else.
Well, it seems like a lot of goths, punks, who are a little more radical in their youth, mellow as they get older.
Yeah.
You find that you've had a renewed sense of rebelliousness. How do you
Always.
hold on to that part of it? Looks change, maybe styles change, but that,
Yeah.
the basic rebellious spirit, have you held on to some of that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's one of the things that I love about the internet is that many of the old gatekeepers are dead and gone, in terms of a bar to entry for getting to your audience. You have to be much more entrepreneurial now and know how to market and get to your audience, especially when the platforms themselves are trying to be the new gatekeepers. But I still have a very much a stick it to the man attitude in me. Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
As I think a lot of us independent artists, yourself included, I think we all do. I think we're all out there, because indie film distribution, because of the people who want to be in charge of that, which are rapidly going away. They've turned that into a toilet, and they've turned it into a nightmare for us to get, certainly indie film and indie productions out there, beyond YouTube and other things like that. And even YouTube will make algorithm changes and things like that, which can make it harder for us to, reach our audience and even monetize. So even though that can be challenging, I'm also, I am very much in favor of the independent artist and people being independent. And I think the internet and what it offers allows us more tools to do that. But I also think that the people that can be behind that in some of the larger companies and the larger gatekeepers, they definitely don't have our best interest in mind as content creators and influencers and people who want to contribute until it serves their interest. So I do have very much of a rebellious attitude towards even that, but certainly I'm thrilled that the internet has changed the game for a lot of it's easy, a lot of people, a lot of creators to be able to go out and do exactly what they want to do, no matter how niche that is, and still be able to make a living at once would have just been somebody's side hustle or even just a hobby.
So what's the media you consume? Like if you're going through YouTube, what kind of channels do you watch?
I love YouTube, and that's something that I was going to say. you know, More people are consuming YouTube in prime time than cable TV at this point, which is interesting and encouraging. For those of us who want to put things on there. So I consume a lot of content on YouTube now, and then I like the streaming channels. I steer away from broadcast TV in a huge way now. And if I visit it, it's not for very long. If I am going to, regular what's now, the digital channels of television, the broadcast things, it's usually PBS or a smaller niche channel or something. And then everything else, I'm looking at what I want, streaming, no commercials on my own schedule on the internet, which is why, YouTube is very much part of that. So that's what I'm consuming a lot. I like video. I like audio a lot. I listen to podcasts as well, like yours, like others. So I like that format as well because I think audio, because that allows you to kind of, you can still work on things. I can create something else and work on something like visually while I listen and learn something. So I like to multitask a little bit in that way. So that's kind of what I'm consuming. And I still like a lot of, whenever I can find it, to go to places where I can find, weird, strange movies, unusual movies, and movies that uh, you know, that I just always would have liked. But that you can find them now, and different things, and a lot of there's even more of show business and eccentrics, creators autobiographies and things like that. I love to see how other people did that, which is probably why I want to tell my story as a creative, individual. But I love watching that in others. I love watching show business stories. I love seeing how art and film and stories and people's unusual lives, evolve and unfurl themselves. I find that fascinating.
So, what are your favorite movies of all time?
Ooh, that's kind of a long list. I've got a bunch of different ones. There's certainly, you know, depends on the category. I mean, I love like super old school things, like, because and this has also come up visually a lot in clubs and in the goth industrial underground, like things like, Metropolis, the black and white film, and the original Nosferatu, German expressionist. There are things in there that are just kind of iconic, in one way. It's like the supernatural and the sci-fi, and those are a couple of huge movies at the time. Metropolis was made, and was it 1926 when it came out? It was made for $1 million. It was the most expensive film ever made at the time. So you can go back to that, and there's other things, and there's weird things from the 50s, the weird sci-fi atomic things. There's the classic monster era from Universal. I love that stuff. Weird stuff from the 70s. I love the Rocky Horror Picture Show, clearly. And then I like a lot of weird arty film kind of things. It's like that, Labyrinth with Bowie. I like a lot of the weird things Bowie did. It's like The Man Who Filled Earth, The Hunger, especially as a vampire film. So those, and then later when he did The Prestige, which is a movie about magic, and he plays Tesla in that, freaking blows my mind. Definitely one of my favorite movies. And I like things like Herschel Gordon Lewis, The Wizard of Gore, which is part of the inspiration for Dark Realm and the storytelling in that, especially in the kind of psychedelic and kind of weird, trippy parts of that. Definitely, pulled from that. I got to meet Herschel Gordon Lewis and talk to him a few times about filmmaking at that. I wanted to remake The Wizard of Gore, and then it wasn't long after that these other guys came out with a remake of it. So that's when Herschel said, just make your own film, do your own thing, and do your own version of it. And when Vinny came to me and said, let's shoot your show, I said, let's not just shoot the show, let's make a movie out of it. And that's how Dark Realm kind of came about. So, but that goes back to the influence of The Wizard of Gore, which came out in like 70, 71, I think, part of Herschel Gordon Lewis and, the godfather of gore. And I love it because I was thrilled that I got to meet him before he passed in 2016. So, so there's that. Like,
movie Dark Realm. It reminded me a little bit of Blood-Sucking Freaks.
Did it? Awesome. How so?
Because it's a horror movie that has like a show within the show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the audience thinks, oh, this is just all an act, it's an illusion, but people really are getting killed.
Right. As is in The Wizard of Gore as well. Yeah. So that's
sounds
interesting.
Like maybe that's always been in the back of your mind and it's just inevitable.
Well, I think so. I think in one way it definitely was. Because that, some of that great, weird, old horror films that inspired me to take the show in that direction, the live show in that direction in the first place. So when it came to hanging my Gothic Illusion show and setting it into a narrative structure that went around and through it. I mean, because like 65% of that is live performance in front of a live audience, but then the narrative kind of weaves into it and through it and packages the stage show. So
65%.
I would say 65, maybe 70% of it. There's a large portion of that which is the stage show, but that weaves into and through the narrative. They cross paths at times, and what's happening in the show I kind of wrote into the narrative, so it integrates really nicely. I mean, nobody's ever made a movie on the magic movie end of it or the horror film end of it that had that much live performance from an actual illusionist and an actor, and actors and actresses that could play the narrative part. It's the first time you ever saw anything really like that. I consider it groundbreaking in that. And some of the reviews really like it because it is not a stereotypical horror film, and it doesn't, just play that typical narrative structure all the way through, but it is live performance meets a horror film, and that's what makes it so unusual. And it makes it, and that's what I think also. It's like it's got those two elements, and then it's got kind of like, influenced by, The Wizard of Gore and other things, the weird trippy parts that make it feel like an art house horror film, because it really is kind of an art film at times too, but it's art house horror because because it's definitely in that genre. So
it seems like
it is what
your role in The Devil Canvas is probably one of your biggest ones yet.
In the Devil's Canvas.
Would you say that's one of your biggest roles that you've had so far?
Well, Dark Realm, The Devil's Canvas is a good role. It's a really good movie, And I was, I play a guy with this kind of a magical influence. I run the local magic shop, but it's a magic shop, magic with a K, not magic with a C. It's, the rather supernatural and ethereal and ritual magic end of that, not, your magic shop where you're doing, card magic and things like that. It's, the supernatural magic. And that put into the art world where you get kind of an art exploitation film out of it, which is really fun and cool. So I like that a lot, and I've gotten some very good reviews in the movie. So I would, if anybody wants to check that out, it's on Vimeo. And that, and then Dark Realm, because I made it myself, it's kind of a labor of love there. And then and Magus, I really love Magus that I did with John Lachago, and I wish it was out there on more streaming platforms. Somebody told me that she found it. My girlfriend told me she found it on what was it? I think Pluto in the cult film section. Okay. And I wish it was out streaming in more places, but I think you can try and find it there. And I love Magus because it's a good juicy starring role, and I just love the film so much. It's got like over 300 visual effects by John Lachago, and written and directed by him. And Vincent Belanci is in it. Al Burke is in it. Al's also in Dark Realm with us. And Al's been seen in like The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler, and he's got well over 100 IMDb credits. And he was Mr. O. He came from the world of wrestling in the 80s, and Al's an awesome guy. And Julie Strain is in it. And
you have a real distinct look in it. It's like on your head and face, the special effects makeup on you. It looks very iconic.
Yes. Well, that's why I was thrilled. It's like when they put me on the cover of the damn thing. I mean, I do have the lead role, but you don't always get the cover, especially on your own. So when the distribution company put me on the cover, John and I were pretty thrilled because we thought that was a big win for the movie, because that was something that he was pushing for, because it represented the film well.
Well, what's that like? Because how many movies have you done with John Lachago?
Well, there was the very first one we did, which didn't make it to completion. And then we made Blood Gnome. And that's another one that's interesting. Blood Gnome is where I met Vinny and I met Al for the first time. I met Julie Strain. And sadly, I wanted to say something about Julie Strain recently passed. And so much love and sympathy out to her family. Her sister Lizzie was with us in Magus and everything. So and her husband, Kevin Eastman and everything. So I want to express my condolences to them, and just say how awesome Julie was. She got a lot of love online. Everybody, was very fond of her. She was great to work with. So she's in those things as well, and I'm thrilled that I'm in those things with her. Now, and she was great to work with. Very, really, very awesome. Very pleasant.
Funny in the one I saw, Blood Gnome. It was a shorter part, but I think you guys had a scene together at that club near the finale.
That's where they come in. That's where I play the dungeon master in that one, and it's an indie horror film, that John's film about these little blood drinking gnomes, but it has a lot of like weird cult horror film cred, because it's set like we were talking about again, in the BDSM underground. So
Is that in an actual BDSM club?
No, we transformed a small studio into the BDSM club. Actually, in Dark Realm, the club scenes were shot in a pro-dom dungeon in Chicago. So that was a real BDSM dungeon here in Chicago. But that one in Blood Gnome, we shot in a studio that we transformed into that set, and it worked out really well, you know. And so I'm in there, and Julie's in there. The Porcelain Twins, the burlesque dancers are in there, and I even did a small version of the Vampire's Kiss, the needle in the neck. In that, that's the first time I put it into a film.
Yep.
So
one thing I like about that is your progression.
Yeah.
Working with these same directors or your same co-stars like Vinny. As you've traveled through this, do you kind of look at each other and go, wow, you know, look how far we've come along?
Yeah.
Get that like sense of pride with each other because now you have something to compare it to.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, when we first started doing that, you know, through Blood Gnome and Magus, and then Vinny stars in Bioslime as well, where at that point I'm doing the voice of the creature, and it's cool to see my voice coming out of the lovely Victoria Dumar in that movie, and that's trippy and fun. So I liked that, and I'd even, you know, I mean, explored doing more voice acting and things like that because of that.
And I saw you in the credit, and I wished you were in more of it because it's such a cool special effects movie.
I like it a lot. Yeah, I wish I was in more of it too. John was so tight on time and budget, we couldn't get everything worked out to actually get me in it. But that's why he wanted me in it so bad. That's why he came out to me when he was in Chicago. We got together and recorded the voice acting, and then he took it back to LA and put it in the film.
Do you think you'll be making another movie for him?
I hope so. He's gone on and he's made several like 3 of the last Killjoy movies, and recently he did with Full Moon, and he recently did what was it? One of the Puppet Master films. So I very much hope to work with John again. He's very talented. He's a good friend. I love working with him. So I've met so many good people through working with him as well, and we all want to go back and work with John. Vinny wants to go back and work for John again. I do as well. All of us do. You know, I know Al would again, Al Burke. So you know, we kind of like to get the band back together again. It depends on the opportunities and that present themselves, because he's kind of moved into some other things, but he is still doing some filmmaking. And I'm hoping he comes together and does something else, or maybe we could all form a project, and then, you know, he could direct it, and we could you know, all kind of, you know, write and produce it together. I mean, we'll see what form that takes. But I would in a heartbeat work with John again. He's awesome.
Now you don't want to direct. You want someone else to free you up so you can just do your acting.
I might do both. I have several films. We've talked about doing another Dark Realm. We have there's a couple of other films, you know, a vampire project, and another just a supernatural project where I'm playing more of kind of a necromancer kind of character. So, and I might direct some of those. I like it only if it's, you know, if it's something I'm writing and helping to produce. I might direct it as well. I haven't done a lot of that other than, you know, in television form, in short form. So I might do that. I'm interested, but not as a you know, as an exploration and to get something shaped the way I want to shape it. I'm not looking at it as a career move necessary to work behind the camera. I like, and I think my forte is being in you know, I mean, I can write and produce, and I've done that in various forms and even helped on some films with that. But I think being in front of the camera and on stage is way more fun for me, and kind of part of the personal brand that I think I can bring more to the party in that sense, you know.
So you don't want to be like Glenn Danzig and build your name up as a director.
It all depends. It was very interesting to watch Rob Zombie, you know, go, you know, transition from really, you know, spooky music into, from the musician and into really, a horror film director at this point. So I've got a lot of ideas, and I've got, a small slate, probably 6 different film ideas that are not entirely fleshed out in the script, some further along than others that I'd love to do. But as a career move, that doesn't necessarily interest me. It's at some point.
So more the
Uh,
writing rather than directing, you think?
yeah. Well, writing, and then and producing. I like helping put it together, but I don't know if I produce necessarily for somebody else. I like having those skills to be able to produce for my own projects. So I don't. I mean, and if I'm involved in a project, I don't mind. I'll definitely lend a pretty production hand to it. But I think there are people who do it a lot better.
All right, because I know the last project just came out recently, but have you been shooting anything new? Have you been cast in anything new?
No, I haven't. Well, for a while, auditions shut down entirely, and now they're doing a lot of virtual, a lot of taped auditions and things like that. So I'm starting to explore that, but I hadn't been looking for a while. I mean, when all the crap hit the fan with COVID and everything, I really, I'm like, okay, I want to and need to be safe. I got to stay out of this like everyone else. Some are more worried about it than others, but I was like, I have the technology and the freedom to do this. So at that point, I was like, well, we just move everything to online. I expanded my personal merchandise brand, beyond just branded things from me in the show into some other just spooky things in the line of t-shirts and mugs and masks and hoodies, things like that, that I personally designed for the show and for the audience beyond that. So I went into, pushing the merchandise line out a little wider and making money that way, and then building the YouTube channel up, into a much better, resource, and starting the live streaming. And the live streaming, I've been on a learning curve with that because of the technology. I mean, I knew how to do it and host a show and everything. It was like making it all work, getting all of your, kind of technical ducks in a row in terms of how the internet is working and the platform we're using and the cameras we're using, and how to get it together and graphically make it all work. So what I've been doing the live streaming is really kind of a live presented version of the old cable show. But like you were pointing out, what I want to do further with that is explore more into even those interviews and discovering more of dark culture and people. And it might even turn into some sort of maybe even a interview and a bit of a magazine format kind of thing.
So what's your best-selling merch item?
There's a few of them. There are these are going well. So these
The
are
mug,
the
of
logo.
course. Now, what's the artwork on the mug?
It is. Can you see it? I mean, I'm trying to get it close enough where you can get a
Oh,
look
it's
at it.
close.
That
It's
that
really
is my logo right there,
okay.
the Magic Circle logo,
I
and
see the
that's been
Fitzgerald. Okay, I see
Fitzgerald
Fitzgerald and
Magic. Yeah.
some artwork. Okay.
hmm And then I've got others that are vampire. I've got another mug that is me, and I did a photo series with Jim Sorfleet of me in Nosferatu makeup because I've got the haircut for it. So and then and
A
it
lot of
is
like you do autographed 8x10s.
oh yeah, I do photos. I have autographed photos and a lot of T-shirts. I've got a nice Blue Moon photo of me in kind of a dark blue forest with the full moon and lights in my hand and my name on it. That does well. I've got another one that's me in vampire gear with fangs and everything and bats behind me, and it says "Release the Bats" on it, and it's very gothic. And the gothic vampire people really like that one. That design
Do
is
any
sold.
modeling? Have you modeled for stuff?
A little bit. I've been in and this is a while ago. I've been in a couple of gothic fashion show kind of things. And I haven't done like fashion modeling, but I've done a lot of work, clearly with photographers and things like that, um,
That's
which
why I
has
used to
been
like about the goth magazines. They always had really cool photo
yes.
layouts. Have you ever done like a photo layout for some fun, goth magazine?
I had been in a few, some of the zines and some of the goth magazines and things like that. Yeah, not nearly enough of them. I'm still, looking, and open to doing more of them. Like, I think we would be,
Do you have a profile on Model Mayhem? Could people look you up for a gothic fashion shoot?
No, I don't have a Model Mayhem one. Is that still widely used, that platform? I was very familiar with it a while ago, but I
think it's still up and running.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I have to think about it.
At your stage, I don't think you need to audition or, because you have enough of a track record. People know who you are already.
Right. Well, and I've been very fortunate in a lot of the films that I've done. The people who know me and that I've worked with will reach out to me, and a lot of times I don't have to audition. I was stunned because the first time I did audition for something, which was a movie called The Thirsting, made here in Chicago, which is I think out in South America under the title Lilith, or something like that. And I'm not sure if I think you can find that streaming now on Amazon, along with Dark Realm and Arkham Sanitarium Soul Eater, I believe, is still on Amazon as well. But
it's got The Thirsting or one of yours. It was on a compilation DVD with 3 other titles.
I think that is The Thirsting. I'm pretty sure it is. It's that, or it might be. I even thought Blood Gnome came out on a compilation as well.
Okay.
But that The Thirsting was in there, and that was a cool film to do. And I'm trying to remember what my point was about.
Be good at.
Yeah,
you might have to audition for this, but they're rebooting True Blood.
Are they really already?
I know it doesn't seem like it's been off long enough to call it a reboot, or maybe just a continuation. And that was a pretty pivotal series. I think we take for granted.
Yeah,
that was kind of a game changer when that came out.
Oh, very much so. It changed so many things, and it was so fun to watch, and I love that. And having been down to down the Vampire Ball and everything in New Orleans and everything, it just I feel like kind of a personal connection to it anyway. And I just love what they did with it, and the characters, and the way they did it, the whole out of the coffin kind of aspect of it being out in modern culture, I thought was a really interesting take, which hadn't been explored before. It was all good. They didn't end the season very well. I wasn't really thrilled with how they wrapped it up, but man, about everything leading up to that, I thought was great. And so
they jumped the shark when the fairy culture started taking over.
That might have been part of it. I mean, I don't know. It still beats sparkly vampires in in other franchises, but yeah. Well, I think they were just trying to get more inclusive and go beyond vampire culture into all of supernatural culture. And when they tried to expand that, either you wanted to go with them there or you didn't.
I like the fact that the main character, Sookie, didn't have the supernatural power, and she was surrounded by it. It's fun to see a mortal having to stand up, to the vicious vampires. I kind of like that. Then the minute she had her little, energy balls, she could like fire back.
Yeah.
It wasn't as interesting, at least for me.
Do you think they went too far when she developed the powers to like be able to do more superhuman abilities? Yeah.
I like she used his defiant attitude to stand up, to the supernatural people. It's like they could have taken her down, but there's just something about her feisty essence that they respected.
The rebellious nature again. Yeah. And I did. I love that about her, and I thought she as a character was really interesting. And then that then kind of love triangle they got into, with her and Vampire Bill and the others, and what is it, Eric and Pam. Oh, I love Pam. I thought she was one of the best things on the show.
Or Pam. Yeah. She was a highlight.
Yes, definitely.
Pam.
Yep.
Well, I think somehow maybe there needs to be a writing campaign to get Ron Fitzgerald on True Blood.
I give good vampire. So some good vampire franchise I am all about. So
Let's see, that's some merch. You need to get T-shirts that say "I give good vampire."
done. I'll make that happen. Thank you.
Okay, my cut is I get a free T-shirt.
Done. You're on. I promise you that. I promise you a free T-shirt of the "I Give Good Vampire" T-shirt.
And I'll wear it on one of my podcasts.
Done. Thank you. Pimp that out.
I'm sure we have lots more to talk about. We'll probably have to schedule another chat. But to kind of wind this one down, because I know you're in a later time zone and you probably have to crawl back into your coffin
Well, the sun's out,
eventually.
covered up a lot of the windows, so I think I'm good. I have to crawl back into my docking chamber.
But for all this stuff we've talking about, how can people discover more of you on the web and websites and YouTubes? Where do they start to find you?
I think the best place is YouTube right now. Please go like, subscribe, as well as your YouTube channel. Both of us. Find us on YouTube, like us, subscribe to us. More of your excellent podcasts and more of my dark, sticky fun. Find me. It's under my name, Ron Fitzgerald, on YouTube. And you'll see it. It's a channel. I'm in the banner, and it's all the dark, sticky fun. There is a second channel. It only has 2 videos on it. That's YouTube's doing, not mine.
So find the one with lots of videos.
Find the one with lots of videos, and that's where I'm at.
And then it's both called just Ron Fitzgerald. That's the channel.
Yeah, just under my name. Yeah. One was made under a different email address, and then they wanted me to go into the Gmail. And when I set it to a Gmail, it didn't change it to a Gmail address on the old account. It made a whole new account, and it was a nightmare, little Tommy. It was not fun. So I tried to get them to straighten out, but until you have a few million followers, they're not really listening. So find the big one, but follow me on YouTube because that's
better than one. Yeah. And how about your website with the merch? Where do they find that?
The merch, go to my website, and you can find that on my via my website, and you can also find it. I'm usually pushing items out through social. So there's a Facebook page. You can find me there, Ron Fitzgerald's Realm. Same thing on Instagram. Same thing on Snapchat. I'm going to attempt little tiny videos now. There's only a couple of pieces up there now. I'm trying to figure it out. It's like, how do I take that much dark, sticky fun and jam it into 60 seconds? It's a new challenge, so we'll see.
60 seconds. That's the TikTok generation.
Well, everybody, if if there's anything else to train your brain to be super ADD, it's TikTok. Yeah. I mean, if you want tiny little chunks, I mean, damn. I mean, which is funny because then YouTube was conversely where you can put the longer form up, but then there's all this stuff. Even YouTube has shorts now, which are 60 seconds and less. You can put short form stuff up there, and then very long things like this interview. And I've got longer pieces that run up to like an hour and a half on some of my live streams on YouTube as well. And they seem to be favoring a lot of the longer content on there because, of course, it keeps you on the platform, which is what they want. And I'm more than happy to entertain you. So if you want to come and hang out for some of my dark, sticky fun and some of your awesome podcasts, then hang with us on YouTube. You'll find us there. Although you're syndicated elsewhere as well, as I get to pimp you out for a minute.
That's right. Send them to the Apple Podcast site. So, because you're going to be on both video, but we're going to have an audio version of the entire podcast on Apple Podcasts. So, well, I love your live stream. Do you have your next live stream scheduled? Huh?
I said, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Can
we get the entire podcast translated into stop action animation? I think that would be fun.
I can probably find someone on Fiverr who could do that for about $15.
Awesome. Let's do it. It'll look like a Tim Burton movie. It'll be fun. Come on.
There you go. I just remember those. I can just see that, there's some heavy, Ms. Pac-Man pixelation. Since we're probably going to have a little Skype pixelation, why don't we just go for it and we just become these little, Pac-Man cutout faces?
Do the dots. Yeah.
It can be fun. Since we're already like big heads anyway, we'll just turn us into Pac-Man heads.
Exactly. Well, that'll be some of the fun things to explore as all of the the apps that you can put on faces and all this other stuff. And we'll
Well, I
do
want to give
that.
you a chance here to wrap up, since so often, like in your cable days, you had fans, but you really had no way to communicate with them or to even know that they existed. So now, especially for the people who have been with you for 30 some years, followed your career along the way, whether it's movies, coming to your live shows, because let's face it, takes a lot to get people to come out to a live show. And bless
Some,
those people, who have done it year after year, die hard fans. What would you like to say to them? I mean, what has that meant to you to have people really stick by with you in your career all these years?
well, it means a lot. I mean, some people have come and gone. I mean, some have went and didn't know really what I was doing since the cable show or earlier on than that, and then they find me later on social and go, "Man, my God, you're still doing this. That's so awesome." So, because they weren't there the whole time, and that's always fun and very gratifying that they come back and see that it's like I don't know why they ever thought I would have done something else. It's evolved, but I didn't stop. They wandered away and then they wandered back, and that's gratifying. It's fun to think that they would come back around later. And for the people that have made it through most or all of it, then I'm eternally grateful and keep watching because there's going to be more stuff and you can find it online. And I didn't mention that my website, if you want to go for the merch and things, is at fitzgeraldsrealm.com. So Fitzgerald with an S, fitzgeraldsrealm.com. And you can find me there. So it's gratifying to know that people like those people that come back, and still recognize me from the cable show, even locally. I'm thrilled that I made something that impacted them, that touched them, and that they think of so fondly later, because it was really a fun time for them, and it was certainly a fun time for me making it. So I always appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that comes along and everybody that is subscribing now to the YouTube channel and following on social, and they do want to come out to shows. And when we're open up again, when people can go back out to live shows, I think we will be when people feel safe again, they will be going out in droves, because we're social animals and we want to do that, which is why it's been excuse me, which is why it's been hard to tamp it down and stay segmented now and sequestered at home and whatever bat cave you've been living in. But I find a lot of people too. It's like one of the things that I find a lot in the audience is that they see all my stuff online, and because they're far away or hadn't been to the right event where I was performing at, they haven't seen me live yet. They've seen Dark Realm and they've seen the performances there. They've seen the things on the YouTube channel and other places, but they really do want to come out and see it live, because that's when illusion, a live show is best, when you're there in the audience, that whole energy exchange with the audience and the weird things that can happen, and that live interaction, not just live online and live streaming, but live in the room with you. There's nothing quite like that. And when you're in that shared communal experience, that's why I think even after this, even though we're so heavily streaming, content and movies and everything, we will still want to go to movie theaters for certain things and events. And we're still want to go live to see music and theater and other things and shows like mine. And that's what I hear more than anything else is, I've got to see you live. I've got to see your show live. So please, when we get to that point, if I'm anywhere near you, please come on out and hang out.
These shows, are you going to bring some men on stage from the audience and put them in the submissive position of getting stabbed and chopped in half?
I possibly my audience seems to like it otherwise, but I think a little gratuitous torture for the entertainment and pleasure of many belongs to men and women, don't you think?
In 2021, I think we've got to shake things up a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I have done that. There was we've done some gigs where we put usually the cremation coffin is kind of like a witch burning theme. and I use that in a very specific way because I like the witches. I've dated a bunch of them. I'm very fond of them. So it's used in a specific kind of way that's actually, again, in a rebellious nature of for them rather than just, a witch burning as it appears. And then we've actually put a dude in the coffin. We have cremated some men live on stage for you. And then there's things like the bronze bat where the ladies are crawling for me.
Do you ever get bachelorette parties?
No, I haven't done any of those not in a long, long time. It was a market I thought about more probably when I had long blonde hair because I think that appealed to them a lot. But no, that's really not a market I really pursued because now it would have to be I'm so kind of niche, even though I perform for general audiences, but that's more at like, a Halloween event or something like that. But it's dark enough where I think, to sell it to that audience, it would still have to be within that audience, the niche that wants a darker show. So I suppose I still could, but not anything I'm currently pursuing. But if you're interested in that and you're out there, feel free to contact me.
There you go. Dark, sticky, magical bachelorette party.
Well, thanks to the wonders of the internet, I'm also an ordained minister, and I've married 4 couples. The last time was like 2 years ago, and it happened in hell. I've been the mayor of hell twice in Hell, Michigan. So I'm also the former mayor of hell. And like any good political career, at the end of the day, they impeach you. It's perfect. I think there should be more of it, actually. And it's kind of going on at the moment. So I've been the mayor of hell twice, and the last time I was there, I also officiated in a wedding in hell. So
a wedding in hell.
Wedding in hell. It's got to be a good start, I guess. If you're not ending your marriage in hell, you're starting it in hell, maybe climbing out. I mean, you can only get better from there, right? I'm thinking maybe that's their strategy. They start in hell and they climb out together. One can only hope, right?
Wasn't that like a Lifetime movie, Wedding in Hell? Sounds like it should be if it wasn't.
Now I want to pitch the Hallmark Channel, I think. Yeah.
Wedding in Hell. You could play like the
starring Ron Fitzgerald, Wedding in Hell.
That's right. You're the minister, the nice minister on the surface who behind the scenes is evil incarnate.
That's right. The sequel to Girlfriend Graveyard, Wedding in Hell.
Oh my God. So hopefully, how can people get petition, petition.org?
Yeah.
That website where people do petitions. Yeah. How can they create one so they can get you on True Blood? They can get 1,000, 10,000 signatures and demand that they put you on True Blood.
Well, if somebody's out there and they've done that before, and you like me and like your podcast well enough, then check out my work, and then have at it. I'll give you all the support I can. I'll share it through my social and everything. If anybody out there chooses to do that, I'm all about it. And then you will get a free I Give Good Vampire t-shirt as well as you, my friend, and whoever might want to form that campaign and get that started. We'll do that. You'll get a
fancy t-shirt. It better be 100% cotton if that's the reward, No polyester blend.
It'll have to be vampire friendly, so I would think natural fibers, something. Yeah.
Natural fibers imported from Romania or Transylvania. Yeah. How's that?
Transylvania. Well, I hear Dracula's castle is still for sale, so might be a nice summer home. We could get everybody there and give out I Give Good Vampire t-shirts, and we'll just go to Transylvania and shoot all that there in the castle.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I want people to make sure that they go to your website, do the YouTube, they look up your movies, The Devil's Canvas, Dark Realm, Dracula Orgy of the Damned, and especially your early work. Blood Gnome is a hoot. Magus, look up your whole catalog just to kind of get immersed in your work so that when the new stuff comes out, they'll be primed and ready and can just see
Yeah.
your evolution.
Yes, exactly. Got it. We'll catch you up if you weren't there. And there's plenty of films to explore if you can find them. I'm hoping more of them come out on streaming platforms and things like that. It's all weird with the contracts with the different distribution deals and everything like that. But I think they should. Netflix, Shudder, whatever, they've been out there. Actually, Blood Dome was on Netflix streaming for a while. I wish it was still there so I could just send people there because so many people have it already. So
For which one, Blood Gnome?
Blood Dome.
And I hate to say it because it's probably cutting someone out of profit, but at least as of this morning, it was on YouTube.
Which one? Blood Dome?
Blood Gnome.
Oh, I also the item is also on YouTube.
Okay. Well, I think my next, if I have to choose, and you said Pluto TV for Magus.
I believe so. My girlfriend told me that she found it on Pluto in the cult film section of Pluto.
I would expect it to be in the cult section. So you're a cult figure. Do you consider yourself a cult figure?
I've got a little bit of cult, notoriety in that genre, and that's cool because that's where I always wanted to be. That was the stuff when I came up. All of the weird underground and cult figures and everything is what I gravitated towards. So I think that is part of my archetype. Clearly, is to be some sort of, cult figure in some way. Not a bad cult. I'm not going to tell you we're going to get on the spaceship and take your tennis shoes and put a purple cloth on you and ask you to take the cyanide. But it's going to be a much friendlier ride in my cult. So come join my cult. Yes.
You're a cult leader without the Kool-Aid. I like that. So, well, I say my official goodbye, but I want, of course, you to have the final words. So in your best horror host / mad magician, kind of take us out and say something dark and sticky for us.
Oh, well, I'll do one of the intros, a little bit of the one of the rhyming spells that I use to introduce things in the show. One eye sees the land of the living, the other the realm of the dead. Betwixt and between, I've always seen the dream that burns in my head.
I think we covered some good stuff. I really wanted to do something different than the other interviews I saw, not just talk about the stuff you've already covered,
Mm-hmm.
So I like that you share just a lot of, more of your psyche.
Thank you. Well, I like it when people take the time to drill down into that because a lot of people don't necessarily go there. They're doing more surface stuff because there's even a lot to unpack there. But I love that you got so far down, into all of that and that you just let it roll. I mean, how long were we on there for?
Well, it's at 2 hours, 40 minutes, probably.
Wow.
Maybe two and a half of that was interview. Part of it was setup. But yeah, I think we went in depth. And one thing I didn't want to, get into me, but, I started out on public access in Seattle in the early 90s. So that's so near and dear to me. That's why I love to talk about that.
That's very cool. Now, what were you doing on public access? What kind of a show did you do?
I made a new 30-minute movie every week on my show.
Did you really?
Yeah, that was starting in 1991, so that was 30 years ago this May.
That's very concurrent to when I was in cable there. Yeah.
And I kind of remember at the time wanting to know other, we called it public access TV in Seattle, but I wanted to know other people, but it was really hard to get to know them, and no one at my station was doing what I was doing. It was like you said, it was almost all religious shows and just boring talk shows.
Political talking heads and then the religious stuff. Yeah. Maybe an odd cooking show or something, but certainly not a lot of entertainment like what we were offering.
Right. And I was actually involved in a documentary. I didn't make it. I was just, interviewed on it, but someone made a documentary about Seattle public access in the 90s.
Wow.
And we were unique because we had some legal trouble. Like people really pushed it, and there was nudity and there was profanity, and they really got in trouble. It almost shut the whole channel down. But it was going to the higher courts, and they were saying this is freedom of speech, and so we tested it in Seattle.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but nobody, whenever I see someone that does an elaborate set or just tries to, have a look to it like you had, that's very rare.
It is, and that's what I found out later, that people were not. It was too much work, especially mostly on their own. It was just too much work to get it together. I had other people that worked with me that asked me if I would come in and host their shows or do other things with them, and I said, yeah, I'd help them out. But they never even got around to making their own shows. They just never got to that point. It was too much work, and they looked at it and didn't go there. So you're right. It is kind of rare to be on there, and then it was rare to have anything with any real production value, making it interesting for the audience, which is why they would come across, and I'm sure your films, and like they did my show, they would come across, they'd be switching through network stuff, and they'd come and land on us and go, wow, what's this? Because it was that cult underground feel to it, which I'm thrilled to be part of.
See, it seemed more punk rock to do it back then than it does on YouTube, just because there are more hoops to jump through, and it just seemed more transgressive doing it on public access.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were really the ones that were, with what you were doing and what I was doing, we were the ones bringing a bit of the underground and putting it out in everyone's face. Where, like you say, we were surrounded by just people trying to usurp it for their own religious and political, aspirations and things like that. And, maybe trying to, push some legislation. And some of it might have been good in the local markets, but mostly it was like a lot of, politicians and self-promotion and things like that. And where we actually wanted to offer more than that, offer something fun to the audience and something different. And it was in its own way subversive. And that I love the subversive nature of that kind of stuff too. That's why I guess I like, being in the cult figure genre, because I find it still more subversive than mainstream stuff.
I like that it told people that we can do this without the so-called production values of network TV, because that was like this huge block of the equipment was so expensive, saying, obviously the average person can't afford, these huge, $100,000 cameras. We're doing it in spite of that on VHS.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what was varying. That's what a 19-year-old or a 15-year-old kid nowadays with a really nice iPhone and, 4K has no concept of what a revolutionary thing that was to get something so low resolution on TV alongside all the network shows.
Exactly. To have an actual outlet for that, which is why I call it YouTube before it was YouTube, because that's what it was. But even then, there was a much bigger bar to entry, than it is on YouTube, where I'm going to take my iPhone and shoot this shit and edit it with all these great apps and put it on YouTube, and it's going to look better than some of the stuff we made 30 years ago just by virtue of the technology. But that's just there for them. Whereas at the time, we had to actually struggle to get out there and get it made. And then there were people pushing back on us even then, like you say, they tried to go at you because of the content. And I got some of the same pushback until I'm like, get me away from the Christian show and I'll be fine. I'm like, who is the programming genius that did this? Because you're just going to piss somebody off. And I thought that was their point, that somebody in there thought it would be funny, that either they were trying to rub that audience the wrong way, or they were trying to get me finished before I started. But somebody did that on purpose because they knew that was not gonna gel.
Well, it's funny. My lead-in was also a religious show, and I love my time slot. I had Fridays at 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
several years, and oh my God, I loved it. But here's what's funny about my lead-in. It was also an import show from Portland, Oregon. So someone in Seattle sponsored it. But it was an evangelist, named Sister Paula. But the
Sister.
little different thing is, I mean, she had the big hair, very Tammy Faye Baker,
Oh, that's awesome.
but she was transgender. But she
Really?
did it without irony. It wasn't like a parody.
Hmm.
She was living, as a woman, and this was, 30 years before the massive,
Yeah.
transgender awareness of today.
Yes.
Back then, so she was getting it from every angle. I'm sure the
Wow.
transgender community hated her evangelistic
Yeah.
show. The evangelicals didn't like that she was a transgender. I thought
Yeah.
that she was the most transgressive thing you could have done at that
Well,
time.
talk about subversive. Yeah. I mean, to be
And without poking
transgender
fun
and
at
go,
it either. It wasn't like it wasn't done tongue in cheek. It was done for real.
that sounds like a John Waters film.
Exactly. So our lead-in was Sister Paula, and I think it was actually a good lead-in. I think some of her people maybe
Yeah.
stuck around and watched my show.
Oh yeah, I would. I could definitely see you getting crossover from that audience. I unfortunately didn't have anything nearly that cool.
And then, like, during that time, I actually took the Greyhound bus down to Portland and met her and interviewed her. The
Awesome.
guy you see, she when she wasn't an evangelical, she was, I think, a secretary during the day, and on the weekend, did the door at the local drag bar.
Wow.
So it's all these multi angles, everything converging.
Yeah.
I think that's what public access did. It was this magnet
Hmm.
for every marginalized group to have a voice.
Yes. Yeah. And that's cool. That's yeah. There should be more of that. I mean, we get that now, but it's like at the time, that's so out there and underground. Because I've always felt I was in the underground of entertainment, and that's part of why I guess I want to tell the story because it was so underground. People find it interesting, but people didn't know about it because it wasn't as discoverable then as me putting it on the internet and talking about it now.
I mean, back then, I started putting on an underground film festival in Seattle, which I think was like the same year Chicago Underground Film Festival did theirs, which I think we were the first two in the country. And if I had kept mine going, 30 years later, but
Hmm.
it was also like this need to create outlets for other filmmakers because there weren't any, because the film
No.
festivals really blocked low budget underground work. And 30 years ago, there just weren't underground film festivals either like there are now. And to
Like
get a
even
theater
slam dance, anything like that.
video,
None of that.
there's
Yeah.
like only one place in Seattle where you could project video with a video projector because they were so
Really?
expensive at the time.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
a little media arts center. Remember the media arts centers?
Yes.
Like everything
Yeah.
revolved around that for low budget filmmakers. They were the first one where you could rent digital editing and it was affordable and
Mhm.
that pre-digital age.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
my circle.
Everything.
So it was kind of like you had to be your own cooperative thing with other filmmakers back then. Now it's much different, but it kind of felt like, we had to build everything from scratch.
Wow. Yeah. Well, pretty much. Yes. You really had to go find it, source it, wrangle it, and the tech wasn't as good, and it was harder to come by.
Oh my God. I mean, just to have like a super VHS camera when that came out
Uh-huh.
in like 1990 or so, where, it had a little bit better resolution. You could edit more without losing resolution.
Yes.
Prosumer gear is what they called it, consumer gear, getting a
Yeah.
little more professional.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Just a little
anyways,
bit. I remember. Yeah.
but
How did you ever
you
get
know that,
a
once
30?
you've done public access, there's just that sentimentality. It just felt like you were doing something so special then.
Yeah, I did, and it was funny too. It's like people still we still got some of that. And I was it the same way for you. It's like I got a lot of cachet, and people thought I had like big money and stuff like that just because I was on TV. And I'm like, I'm on your local cable channel, dude.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, I would imagine you got the same thing though, because I don't know how you were able to produce an entire 30-minute film every week like that.
I was working a full-time job to pay my rent, so I'd
Yeah,
ride on my
yeah,
lunch hour, casting was such a huge part. I'd shoot Saturdays, Sundays. I'd edit Sunday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. Turn it in Wednesday. They'd show it that Friday. I had no buffer. I literally had to make each week's episode that week and have it fully edited, add music, cinematic angles, and all that. But I did it because I had my own equipment. I didn't have to rely on the studio.
Yeah,
there's no way to do that if I had to book time at the studio.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because if you're like checking out equipment and things like that too, and then that has to be in like within 4 hours or some crazy crap like that, and then you're not going to be able to produce that kind of content.
I just really had no personal life except for my 9-to-5 job. Every waking hour had to be spent on the show.
Well, you need somebody with you, and a partner or somebody with you that'll then go down and wants to be there and help you make that stuff, that, and then you get to spend time with somebody. Other than that, no, there's like no personal life at all then.
Because I had to literally use my camera as the playback deck. Then I had one deck that I could edit the master on, and the wear and tear I put on my camera because I couldn't afford a second deck.
Oh yeah, it'll eat the heads right out of that thing if you keep rolling that stuff through there and editing like that and pausing it and everything. Yeah,
reusing 2-hour tapes, and those were like $12. So reusing, I've got 10 minutes here, 10 minutes on another tape. It's rewinding, fast forward, over and over, and it was so labor intensive.
Oh yeah, because when I had a couple of those hour specials, which are those first two that are doing really well. I've got them up, Forbidden Realm and Every Day is Halloween. Those 2-hour specials of the cable show I've got on the YouTube channel now. I used to sell those, and I used to have to one at a time hand crank those out on VHS dubbing, and then package it, make the whole artwork, and glue it all in the box, and then sell them in the mail myself. And yeah, it was a grind. I mean, at least they had some editing equipment for us. They had like a 3/4 inch in the studio, but then they had a 1/2 inch system, so you could edit actual VHS tape and everything. So I was able to make demo reels and other small parts to the show that we would then transfer to 3/4 to cut into the show later. But I mean, I didn't have to do it quite as rigged together as you did, using your camera as a play deck and everything.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned earlier you like watching, documentaries about the creative process.
Love it. Yeah.
You might want to make your own. And so I've made a couple about my work, but I made one more recently. Yeah. And you don't have to watch it, 'cause I hate to force my work on people, but if you'd like to see some of my process, it's under an hour. But it not only shows more current work, but I do reference some of my public access show. You can actually see some clips.
Nice.
And one actress that I've worked with for 30 years that I started out with on public access, who I didn't know. She came in for a cold audition, and I put her in almost everything. And she's like 81 now.
Wow.
I think she was like 50 when I first cast her. But you want to talk about how do you keep that transgressive spirit alive 30 years later?
Yeah.
While still having, some production values, not that much higher, but some.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a challenge. How do you keep that spirit alive? Do you need to, if you want to, the rest of the world judges you like, unless you've moved up to $1 million movie, you haven't progressed. But if you still stay with what you loved 30 years ago, how do you maintain that in spite of not getting the acknowledgement from everyone else?
Right.
That's hard. That's hard to. That's the one thing no one ever talks about.
Yeah.
Oh, I've kept on to my art for 30 years, and I didn't go back to to business school, and I don't have the cushy jobs that everyone else got because they applied themselves and they didn't follow their art.
Right.
That's the hard part to talk about with people. It's hard for non-artistic people to understand that sacrifice.
I don't think they're gonna get it. I think you have to be, one of us, bohemian creator weirdos to understand that journey and to get that. Other people outside of that are looking for a big paycheck and what society says is your your thumbs up that said that's what everybody else tells them what means they're doing well and progressing and is admired as to what creatives, find as benchmarks for us. Those are very different things.
That's
It's
why
like, yeah,
if you make a documentary, you're the one who is. No one's, beating down your door to make it. Hollywood's not, sending someone out. You have to preserve your own history. That's what I have found. You have to show people why that
yes,
was important, at least to you, and
yeah,
maybe, for other people, they'll rediscover that and maybe see your work in a different light after seeing your perception of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You have to educate your future fans.
Well, that's it. That's what I said. It's like catch everybody up to, how I got here for, because I think there was a lot more people that would have been interested in it if I had the kind of distribution I could have, like we have on the internet now. Um, I think I could have amassed a big
Mhm.
fan base for the cable TV show, as I'm sure you could, for all that film. Have you done distribution or done your own anthology of those since then to put them out?
You know what's funny is back in the 90s, I put out on home video a
Yeah.
VHS compilation of 9 of my favorite episodes.
Awesome. Yeah.
And that was kind of cool to learn that. In the 90s, I think I put out 3 or 4 home videos on VHS, and, you know, making my own artwork for, the printers on my primitive, printer, and having 4 color separations that, on a 5
Oh,
megabyte
yeah.
memory computer, and
All of
everything
that
the hard way.
digital stuff we had to do. And I had to do tons of the same kind of thing, especially, I mean, I was still, making flyers and distributing flyers for freaking live shows and stuff through in clubs and everything. It's not like now with social media and being able to digitally, whip these things up that look so much more professional because the tools are all there. So yeah, I did exactly what you were doing and grinding out all the artwork myself and everything. At least I had some help because my girlfriend was such a good artist. She could at least do that, and she, so she took some of that pressure off of me, on the art. But
Hmm.
you're still driving, the look and the edit of all of that art if you're not doing it yourself. So yeah, but grinding all that stuff out by hand
Well, my
because
other thing
everything.
too was back in the day when I had some confidence from making my public access show, wanting to make that leap and, admiring some cult figures and thinking, getting the confidence to ask people with a reputation if they would be in my project. Although to me,
Yeah.
it wasn't Julia Roberts, it was more like very specific cult icons with a very small niche. But to me, that was like getting Julia Roberts, getting a very small scale cult figure in my film.
Yes.
And that was,
Exactly.
in some ways more exciting because those people kind of just immerse themselves into my world without any attitude, just being
Exactly.
a part of my entourage. And to me, that was more fun.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I had talked to because I met her a good few times and was dating an actress in Florida that actually knew her. We talked to Linnea Quigley about being in Dark Realm because I
Oh,
thought it
cool.
would be fun to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
like an actual bona fide scream queen in the movie would be fun. But as it turns out, we did not have enough budget. She wasn't very expensive, but her day rate and then playing her and putting her up and everything was money I really couldn't divert from anything else in the film that we
But
did.
what's ironic, talk about small world. I'm starting to work on a new documentary,
Are you?
and it's with
Yeah.
this guy that's had a career since the 80s. Started out as an actor, went into producing, writing, and different segments of the industry, home video. He had an editing company in Hollywood, probably in the early to late 90s, and all these different facets of his career. It just so happens he now lives here in the Northwest. And one of his early roles was with Linnea Quigley back in the 80s.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think 86. It was called Assault of the Party Nerds. And he played this guy in a fraternity
Yeah.
and she played his girlfriend, and they actually have like a scene in bed.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
so years later, Linnea made the Linnea Quigley horror workout, kind of like a horror aerobics
I do
tape.
remember that. Yeah.
And in the tape, she does this quick little clip of her scene with this guy when they're having sex in bed.
Wow.
That's in the horror workout. So that's kind of like their funny thing they have. And I guess they run into each other at horror conventions every now and then
Mhm.
and joke about it. But this guy, another thing he's done since then, he puts out a line of comic books because he's
Oh,
always, even though he did all this other stuff, what he really wanted to be deep down was a writer.
yeah.
And then
That,
he loves like the iconic universal horror monsters. He
yeah.
he's into Dracula and the Mummy and the Werewolf and all that. So kind of
Mhm.
does his modern takes on that.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So for me, I'm always, that's been a natural part of me to be interested in other
Mhm.
people's creative process. And also, like in his case, I said, you deserve for your career to be more known. You have to preserve it at this point in your life.
Yeah.
He's like
Yeah.
64 this year, you know,
Wow.
still active, but I said, someone's got to tell your story, while you're still around.
Yeah. Are you going to do it? Are you
Oh, I've
working on
already
that?
started filming it.
Good. You're going to be like the Ken Burns of like the cult figure set. That's going to be awesome.
Well, I am, and I actually just finished another documentary last year, and it's kind of people that I bring into my circle, but it's a guy who was a drummer in a punk rock band here in Seattle.
Yeah.
They were called Dead Vampires. So they were
Oh,
a
nice.
vampire horror themed punk band.
Mm-hmm.
And they had really cool music, really cool stage shows. And plus, he, like, is a collector of horror memorabilia. That's how I met him, through that circuit. Huge collection of just funky memorabilia and videos and things. And we've become very good friends since then. I spent like 5 years videotaping him and, knowing him in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of like my follow up to that, but it kind of just reminded me that, I really like this niche culture.
Yes.
And it's satisfying just to preserve someone's story like that, because they wouldn't otherwise do it themselves.
No, not necessarily. No, exactly.
Yeah. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
mission, in addition to making my other stuff. But I think the podcast is kind of an extension of that. That's you know gotten my
Yeah.
renewed interest in hearing other people's stories too.
Well, yeah, you have to have a natural curiosity about that. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And you clearly do. I mean, I was thrilled that you did all the looking around the research that you did, to find out all of this other stuff. So, thank you.
It's all about the research.
You're exactly right. It is. It is. When I want to do anything, I mean, the first thing I do is go, you got to go research it. Well,
And
yeah, yeah, exactly. You got to spend your time doing what you're great at,
right,
and that means you've got to let somebody else do what they're really great at to help you. Yeah.
right. And for me, just knowing I don't want to act early on, that was easy. Knowing I could be on the set and
Yeah.
direct the actors, and not wanting to do what they're doing. That's
Yeah.
very freeing. There's a lot of people who secretly want to do something other than what they're doing. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
nice to not have that nagging thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is so many people don't pursue that, what's going to actually make them happy, and some of them are not doing it simply because they don't know how to monetize that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or
like
or
for
they
the
don't.
people who want to be on camera, I admire that. Like
Yeah.
up until recently, I didn't want to do my podcast on camera. I didn't even want to be on camera
Really?
until someone said, "Well, you could really expand on YouTube," and I said, "Okay, sure, I could do it," but just
Yeah.
knowing I had never wanted to position myself that way, and I think that's what gives me the fly on the wall perspective to put other people on camera or to put other people on the pedestal.
Yes.
And that's what we need. I mean, performers need direction. They need
Yeah.
that person's with a different kind of ego. So all their ego is going to make that actor look good.
Well, yeah, we need that outside, perspective. That's one reason I like to act, because I like collaborating with people that are making the project and know what they want. And when
Hmm.
they bring me into it, they're bringing me in like so many times they haven't had to audition. They ask me to come in because they know what I bring to the party and they like that. So
Yes.
that's made it easy. But I'm hoping when I go out and actually audition for more things and some bigger projects, I'm hoping they see that value of what I bring to the party as well. And since I have all of this on set experience and everything now for 20 years, I know my way around. You know,
Exactly.
I know my type and I know what I bring to the party. So I think that's an advantage over somebody who's new coming in that doesn't know. And I have some experience and I think that would allow me to kind of leverage some of that cult mojo into a putting it in front of a larger audience too.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah,
Well,
it's kind of like what John Waters has done with a lot of his stuff. It's like I'm thrilled that he's blown up in the way he has, because he still wants to put the spotlight on some cult figures and things like that. And he still loves that kind of stuff. That's subversive and weird and underground. He still has that feel, even though he's got much bigger budgets and distribution and everything now.
right, and in his case, it's an attitude. Everyone, wants to be John Waters, but they miss out what makes John Waters John Waters, and
Yes.
it's because there's a certain intelligence about it. It's not because he's campy. It's because he
Right.
actually comments on culture.
It goes deeper. You're exactly right. It's like what what you drill down into. It's and you touch on it so many times, even in the interview, is you're going into the culture, the underground cultures that I have moved through and that inspire what I do, like the goth industrial subculture and horror and everything else there, and even into the Halloween industry and everything. All of that's you put a stamp on what I do and and the magic world too, which is the thing that I find least interesting about it, even though where I'm at in a lot of it with the show is the magic world has been probably the least influential of all the other things because I think the other things make that way more interesting to me.
Do you remember back in the '70s the Bill Bixby show, The Magician?
Yep. Oh yeah.
That was my favorite show at that age.
I loved it. Yeah, it wasn't very long lasting, but man, I thought he was really good in that role too.
It was like, and then it was a syndicated show. I think he also hosted. It's like the World of Magic, something like that. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
It was like a
Yeah.
half-hour show, and they would feature magicians from all over the world on stage.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I just thought that was I was just in heaven to think, wow, there's like two shows where you saw magic every week.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And that was kind of at the time, like right after that, it's like, just before David Copperfield broke, there was Doug Henning, that kind of hippie magician.
Right? Oh yeah, yeah. He was
And I really liked
a
what
lot
he
back
did because
then.
he was the first time I saw a magician. It's like, wow, you don't have to wear a tux and have this clean, friendly look. You can do something different. And I saw him with the long hair and the flamboyant clothes and everything, and you're just like, you can do more with this. And that was my first inkling that, because I mean he was fantasy, but he was all like puppies and rainbows, and I was like vampires and gargoyles and stuff. So I was like, okay, let's just take that idea and go to the dark side with it.
Oh God, I haven't remember Doug Henning in years. That's a
I
blast
know.
from the
I know.
past.
Doug's been gone for a while too. He passed in 2000. So he was
Oh,
just getting ready to kind of come back. He was starting to make like a little bit of a rumblings of a comeback through the magic industry, and then he was gone suddenly, which is sad. But man, when I was a kid, I loved his stuff.
didn't he have like the suspenders and
He did suspenders, lots of rainbows, and tight shirts and flared jeans and things like that. Yeah,
it's kind of like a leftover from Godspell.
exactly. That's exactly what it looked like. Yes,
Amazing.
big
I'll have to
curly
look him up on
blonde
YouTube
hair and
today.
stuff.
Do you think there's any old concerts or shows of his on YouTube?
Oh yes, you can find some old Doug Henning on YouTube. Some of his old. He had like a good half a dozen TV specials
Right.
until he got into when he transitioned into the 80s and the 80s culture took over. he had a very hard time trying to pivot with that, and it didn't work. And then he retired, and then David Copperfield just took over, and he was like all the magic specials from then on. He did like 20 in a row, and Doug did like maybe a half a dozen.
Well,
So
don't you
at the
think
time, I remember
Mork and
it was
Mindy?
first have both of them, and then Doug was gone.
Who was it when Robin Williams on Mork and Mindy kind of stole Doug Henning's look?
He did a bit of that, yes. He had the tight shirts and the suspenders and everything. It was the Mork from Work was very Doug Henning in a
Very
way.
Doug Henning. And, I was gonna say, Doug Henning was in a musical, I think on Broadway. Do you remember that?
It started in Canada. He got a grant from the Canadian government and did a show called The Magic Show. And then
Hmm.
they took it to Broadway, and it was written by like Ivan Reitman was part of that too, from Ghostbusters and stuff. Ivan Reitman was part of that. And then
Wow.
and then that's what broke him. Then he got his first TV special where he did, the Houdini water torture escape at the end of his first, live TV special on NBC. And that's what started his career in television magic. So he
Wow.
kind of brought us the new version of TV magic specials. And then Copperfield came along a couple of years after that. But then Doug later returned to Broadway with another show called Merlin, which was more like the magic show on steroids. It was bigger and more, a flashier, bigger budget. And I don't think that did very well. And I even have a poster for this. They actually cast and shot a version of the magic show for a movie. And I have the movie poster of that with Doug Henning in it. I don't know what that's worth now, but I think it's pretty cool to still have that. And I don't think I've ever seen the movie of it.
Mhm.
I've seen a video of the stage show, but I've never seen the movie of the magic show. And they made a movie for it apparently. I don't know if it didn't get released or what, but I was able to snag one of the posters at a poster show.
Oh my God.
Weird.
Well, I bet if I did a search, I could find footage of Doug Henning on the
Mhm.
Mike Douglas show.
Yes, there you go. You
Seemed
can
very
find it.
or Merv Griffin, one of those.
Well, yeah, and there was somebody selling. My friend he bought like VHS copies that somebody had copied of a VHS copy of his old TV specials. So I have a bunch of his old TV specials that he then made for me. And I always thought it was weird that nobody ever did a documentary on Doug, because I always thought that would be awesome.
That would be
To
awesome.
kind of because when he vanished from, when he couldn't pivot into the 80s culture because he was so entrenched in hippie culture kind of look, and it timed out, then he went into politics. He actually ran for office in the I think in Canada. He tried to do a political pivot there, which was weird for him. And he had studied with the Maharishi Yogi, the same yogi that the Beatles studied with, and he was very into transcendental meditation. And that was something that he always put in his stage. When you went and bought the show bill for his, the show book for his live shows, there was always a whole page devoted to the Maharishi Yogi and transcendental meditation, trying to clue people into it and what he got out of meditation. So it was weird that it was years and years and years later, but by the time I finally came around to meditating and things like that, and but I'm like, what took me so long? It's like I knew that about Doug Henning when I was a kid, and it took me a long time to come back around in there to see the benefit. I guess I just learned more about it and then decided to dive in, and that was interesting. But I was saying, between all of that and then him starting to make a comeback into the magic world and then being gone, he died very quickly of like pancreatic cancer, and that was in 2000. And I always thought, it would be. And he was actually married. His first wife, Debbie, was Deborah DeAngelis. I think she was like a life coach, or very famous life coach or dating coach or something like that for a while. So she had a public persona after that. Or Barbara DeAngelis, and then Debbie was his second wife, Debbie Henning. And I always thought, I was like, wow, why did nobody ever go and write a book or do a documentary on Doug Henning? Because I think that's more than interesting to people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Who knows? It will probably be seeing that on Netflix in the next year.
I would love after Walter Mercado's. Did you watch the Walter Mercado one on the astrologer Walter Mercado? I thought that was fascinating because I didn't know much about him. I'd seen him on TV. I didn't know any of his story, so that
Right.
was cool to watch. Yeah.
Oh, look that one up. Well, documentaries are becoming even more popular.
They're hotter now than anything else. They say that because that's one of the things. If you've got all your footage and then you're doing voiceover and you have your interviews and stuff shot, that's one of the things they can actually get through post now without having to worry about a lot of actors and things. So
Hmm.
they say that it's actually the documentaries that they think will float them until they have a lot of new narrative content ready for the platforms.
Since you make so little, why not put out tons and build up your reputation, then make that payday down the line on that next project? Because you know what? You
Yeah.
normally get paid, your upfront fee is where most people get their money. Build up your name so someone will pay you a chunk of money to make that next project.
Yeah.
Because residuals, who knows?
Well, especially with them not wanting to do residuals on a lot of new media things, yeah, I mean, we've got to make our money, and that's something else they talk about as being entrepreneurial and using your movie as a platform for other things, which for me was selling the live show and the merch to it and everything. And I'm trying to even expand the merch. I've got, t-shirts and cups as part of my merchandise line. So I was already kind of trying to go that way with it because I've had a hard time making all the money back from the movie because Amazon isn't paying much of anything. At least it was somewhere where people could easily find it and see it. And we put it on Film Hub, so it's going out. It's even in Italy now on some platform there. But I mean,
Oh,
we're
that's good.
making pennies on the dollar. But it is good that it's being seen because they have devalued the online content so much from what they
So
used to want to give you for physical, for DVD and everything, and before that on VHS, that at least in horror, there's still a lot of collectors, so you can still sell some physical, but not like you could in the 90s and early 2000s.
it's criminal how, especially Amazon, has just hacked away at any profit for the indie on the Video Direct program.
For a $1 billion company and for a guy who makes billions of dollars and didn't pay taxes, I think he could afford to give us something for our content. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Hopefully some new entrepreneurs will provide that outlet and it'll just take off and it'll be a lot more fair.
Well, I think it is, and there's other more curated platforms that pop up a lot, like Shutter's good for horror and things like that. And I'd like to approach them about the movie as well because they look for all kinds of unusual horror films and things like that, and that would be the right audience for it. So I'm even
Very
looking
much
at
so.
that. I wanted to really get it on Netflix, but I think that might be hard because of when it was made, and I don't know if it's up to their pristine standards at this point. Although they are buying more horror films, I heard at the moment, and I think because they're starting to need more content while things have been shut down, there might be a chance, but I'd have to get it into a 4K file to even consider pitching it to them. So
Yeah, a
I'll
little
see.
window of
That's what. Hmm?
yeah, a little window of opportunity.
Excuse me. Yeah, I'm hoping so.
That's good.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, it would be nice if not then, somewhere else. But it would be nice just because it's like Netflix is kind of the new HBO, which is weird that HBO's now got HBO Max, but Netflix has the lion's share of the subscribers so far.
Right. Well, as soon as I watch Magus, I'll send you a full report.
Thank you. Yeah, check that out. Were you able to watch Dark Realm?
Yeah, I watched it last night.
Did you? Awesome. Thank you. Good. What
I
did you
enjoyed
think
it.
of it? What did you think of the whole thing?
Well, see, I didn't research it too much going in. So I
Yeah.
was happy that I got to see a lot of your stage performance. I didn't realize I'd be able to see so much of that, but it
Yeah.
was it was good. And I liked Vinny. I thought,
Yeah.
wow, he was fun. And I think when I saw Blood Gnome, I go, oh, that's the same guy. And then I looked up his credits. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. You worked with him. Did he also direct it?
Dark Realm? Yes.
Dark Realm.
He directed Dark Realm for me. Yes.
Yeah.
We kind of split it. We co-wrote and co-produced it. And then, I started in it and put together all of the magic and did the casting and everything on that end. and then he put together the crew and directed and ran kind of the other end of it. So we were able to come together really perfectly on that. And then we sat down and did a lot of the edit together. So it was really it was kind of the perfect combination to make that particular movie the way it was, with the illusion show and a narrative.
Yeah, I think to preserve your illusion show, I mean, just for that alone, to, that
Yes.
place and time in your shows, but also the BDSM club. I mean,
Yeah.
that was probably one of the more visually interesting parts, apart from your stage show.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, the
Everybody
girl with
likes that.
stapling the cards into herself, and
Oh yes.
there's just
Cherry.
lots of twisted little things in there.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted. It's like that's exactly the kind of like goth and fetish kind of clubs that I had played my show in for so long, and I thought it would be fun to kind of explore that and pay homage to it and show that to people that weren't there. And a more mainstream audience, even a mainstream horror audience that comes to that is kind of surprised by what that club scene is actually like because they'd never experienced it. And I thought that was fun to share that with people that way. And I'm like, oh yeah, I lived there with my show for a good many years. Those were the kind of gigs I was doing while doing the cable TV show. Those where I was making money. It was in those kind of clubs at night doing my illusion show because it was dark enough to take them, like them, and then Halloween, haunted attractions, stuff like that too. It was always a big season.
And I think overall there was a consistent tone, because even though on the surface it had this dark subject matter, there was still a lightheartedness to it. Like,
there's a little bit of camp to it.
Emotionally scar people, or it was still meant with a lot of fun.
Well, that's the thing. It had to fit the brand of dark, sticky fun, which is provocative, but it's also, like you say, like horror hosting is. There's dark things in nature of it, because the films are of a darker nature, but it's also fun. You can't make fun and have fun in that dark space unless you know it and love it. And so that allows me to do that. So it did. I'm glad you find that, because I didn't want to. It's like when I walk into the dressing room and the girls are like, "Yes, master." That's all meant to be just fun and funny and stuff like that, and not incredibly serious. Huh?
And it came across that way. They were doing
that's good. That's how it was intended and how we wrote it and shot it. So that is good because we wanted to make something. It's kind of reminiscent of those kind of all those those franchises I love. And then I think you love too, of like 80s horror franchises, like even Freddy Krueger. He's gory, but he's cracking jokes while he's killing teenagers. And I fucking loved that.
Now, we didn't even mention Lord of Illusion, the Clive Barker film.
Clive Barker, Scott Bakula starring in that? Yes.
Which I have very mixed thoughts about. I've seen it several times. I saw it when it first came out. I'll watch it every few years to revisit it. You could tell he really wanted to create a horror movie with a magician angle to it. I think it was based upon one of his stories.
Yeah.
I was kind of disappointed because I don't think it really knew what it wanted to be. It had potential in several different areas.
Right. It did, but I think the way in that it kind of tries to go from stage magic into the supernatural was not a clear story. You're right.
And the cult, there was this cult which was kind of interesting, but it seemed kind of like a gimmick that took away from. I wanted it to be about the magician and the whole private eye thing. It was an interesting idea, but in the end, you want to go into this for the magic, and so it seems like there's still room for a big magic-based horror movie, about a magician.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Because I think he was close to it, but he does. He kind of gets lost in there. It's not clear cut where, you go from the interest in theatrical magic, which leads you into the interest in the occult, which is kind of what I'm talking about in the storyline of Dark Realm. But since it's so heavy on the performance, it doesn't narratively explore that to its fullest. Yeah.
But then you got a movie like The Prestige.
Yes.
Which was so good, and and a period piece to boot, and
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too because they brought that back around, and when you get that merging of you know, almost the mystical and science when you bring Tesla into the story, I'm just like blown away by that. And the fact that that's played by Bowie was just, you know, extra cred for me. You know, I was just like, this is
Mhm.
perfect.
You know, another thing with Lord of Illusion, I just did not like the character of the magician. He was just so off-putting, and I never wanted to get
Yeah,
inside his psyche.
and that's a problem with you when your protagonist is not somebody you can identify with or like.
Mhm.
You're not going to enjoy going on that ride. Yeah, that's a hard sell.
If they had put
Exactly.
Scott Bakula as the magician, I
Yeah,
probably would have been opened up because he's engaging and has a certain
much better.
likability.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I would have made the guy who played the magician the cult leader
Yeah.
because he was kind of creepy.
Well, I think that was their point, you know, on that. But, you know, I don't think, like you say, I don't think the story was clear enough about when one butts up against the other and everything, you know?
Yeah,
And
and that's
Scott,
where I think those creative decisions, tone is so important in a project, and casting is so important.
absolutely. Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you know the tone right off the bat, not everyone will like it, but those who like those toned movies, they're going to
Yeah.
like it. So don't worry about, like, I hate being when people are fake edgy, you know, they
Yeah.
think, oh, this has to be, you know, very nihilistic and hopeless. You know, not everything has to be that way.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. I mean, that seems to be a contemporary throw towards everything is towards, you know, everything's got to be kind of nihilistic and this, you know, dystopian and woke on top of
Yeah.
it. So you get all this social justice warrior stuff, which I like, but don't preach at me. Tell the story of why that is good, and we will follow the example. And now they want to hammer you over the head with it, which is a mistake.
And it's lazy
And just,
writing. We put in a placeholder that represents that wokeness
yeah,
without taking you on that woke journey.
well, exactly. You can have all of those elements in there, but if you tell it by example instead of wagging your finger in our face with it, we will get it. And I think that there's a discredit to the audience where they don't think we're going to get it if they're not preaching it to us. And I'm like,
It's
oh, no, no, no,
creating a lot of two-dimensional characters because
and
most
bad
interesting
stories.
characters have moral ambiguity, and they're not
Yes.
all good or all bad.
That's why I love playing anti-heroes. That's why I like being where I am. Even the Magus, when you see that, that's kind of got an anti-hero kind of feel to it. I mean, he's clearly the villain, but I also, in my personal view of it, is he's more of an anti-hero. You know?
Well, enjoy the rest of your day. It must be what, 5 o'clock your time now?
Time are we here? Here, it's about 3:56.
Okay, we have a little time to make some dinner or something.
I'm yes, I'm all good. I made some. I told you I like to cook. I made some Thai pumpkin soup, so perfect because it's cold as hell here today.